now. So now everyone needs to look pretty and nice. So, and first of all, hello everyone to this amazing entertainment finance course that you're going to lose your hair over. Let's say that. Great to meet you all virtually. So what we're going to do, when you guys come in, you're going to mute yourself. I will walk you through a little presentation. I will open it up for questioning at some point, and then you guys can ask questions. So I suggest as we go through the presentation, just take some notes, write them down on a piece of paper somewhere, so you can let me know your questions the minute we open it up for questions. I just want to go through the presentation, and then once I'm done with the presentation, which also will include some case studies, to be fair, Wendy Sweetmore will do a little guest speaking sessions. Wendy is someone, first of all, she's an amazing producer. I met her at a panel, at a women's film panel. I don't know why I was on there, I totally forget, but it had to do something with film finance, I guess. But Wendy was on there because I think she was working at the time for MGM or Mark Burnett, or just had opened up her own company, something like that. She'll tell you about this. But she just has this amazing energy. She does fantastic projects. And what I like about her is that she does many things. She does documentaries, she does small budget movies, big budget movies, she does television content, shows, anywhere from competition shows to series. So she's a very multifaceted producer who was originally from Australia. So she'll talk later to you about all the beautiful things that she has to share. I'm going to ask her some questions, and then you can dive in and poke some holes into her if you want. So I'd like to start our presentation. We are going to do this little PowerPoint. So what I'm doing here with this PowerPoint, and by the way, these meetings, I'm going to do them about every 2 weeks approximately. You guys are spread all over the globe. So I have people in Asia, I have people on the East Coast, people in Europe. So what I do, in some cases, depending on how many, like yesterday I did this very class at night, on Friday night. So that means for the Asians, it was Saturday morning. So what I might do, and I start doing this more because more people come from different parts of the world. So you can basically choose, do you want to do a Friday night class or do you want to do a Saturday morning class? And I'll announce them on Canvas as we go. I would do them more frequently if I get more questions. When I see people are, I'm not saying struggling with the modules, but the questions are coming in, then I'll do them more. If you guys are doing well on Canvas, and it really always depends on the level of the class, who's in the class, then I'm going to spread them out a little more. The class is designed to go by itself without me doing these live classes, just so you know. So if you can never make it, they're not mandatory to begin with, but if you can never make it, and have to, even if you don't make it and you don't watch the recordings, you still will be okay with the stuff that you see on the modules. What the online class will do and help you do is get some questions answered, get clarifications on things that you just want a clarification for, or for you to share some things with us, you know, stuff that you might be working on where you got stuck or have questions, so we can talk about that. So feel free when we go and do these online classes to share also about projects that you're working on. We have virtual office hours also. I will do those every 2 weeks as well. We have some next week, Saturday morning. I try to kind of stick to the Saturday mornings. Now again, if you are in a time zone where the Saturday morning just doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. Email me and suggest another day or time, and we'll just get on the phone or on Zoom together and do a meeting that way. So I'm not totally stuck to this has to be the office hour slots and that's it. So if you want to talk to me, just reach out, send me an email, and we'll get on the phone or on Zoom. All right, I'm going to dive in. This presentation will take about an hour or so, depending how many questions we have. And after that, I'll give it over to Wendy. All right, everyone ready to rock and roll here? Let's go. So you made it through the first 2 weeks of the module, which basically talked about a little bit the history, how the industry started, how it changed over the last few years, where we are today, why we are where we are today. And you got a little bit of a taste, a small, tiny taste, overview about the distribution aspects, the differences between the major studios and the independent model as it comes to distribution and financing. We got a little taste of a mini finance plan. I'm going to actually do one with you out of module 2. That's the assignment you guys were free to take. And You got a tiny little intro into the world of financing and the history of Hollywood and the changing landscape as we have it. If you do have questions about the first two modules, write them down. I will open it up to questions later, and then you can ask me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the case study that we did in module 2. I just want to walk you through it. Some of you did it, some of you didn't. So don't worry, it's an assignment you can do. You don't have to, but I want to walk you through it just so you understand the basic concepts that we're starting with when we put together a finance plan for a movie. This is a movie, obviously it's fictitious. Fictitious, is that a word? Fictional is the word. Movie doesn't really exist is what I want to say. I made that up. So we'll call it Taken in London. The budget for the movie was assumed to be $11 million. If we talk about the cost, we are assuming that we're going to have a senior loan from a bank as part of the finance plan. We're going to assume that we have a production incentive from a region where we're shooting that will support us and give money back to us based on the money that we're spending in the region. And that money is from a state or a country that incentivizes production, so we don't have to pay that back. And then we're going to assume that an equity financier will cover the balance to cover our production cost. We also assume that we have something that's called a collection agency applicable, and I will talk to you about what a collection agent actually is. For now, just imagine it like an escrow agency that takes all the revenues and pays all the expenses and costs. We'll get into them in a little bit. And then we'll obviously talk about the sales agent / distributor who is going to sell the distribution rights of your movie on your behalf. We'll look into the revenue side of things. We are assuming that this movie is going to be covered through international sales revenues with 75% of the budget. We're going to talk about the fact that the movie will secure pre-sales of 35% of the budget. But let me talk real quick about international sales estimates and pre-sales because it's important you understand. When you put any kind of content together, project, it could be a documentary, could be an art house movie, could be a regular globally to be released movie, global audience driven movie. What you want to do is you are talking to a sales agent who is someone who takes your movie and sells all the distribution rights related to your movie to all the countries all over the world. So the rights for Germany get sold, the rights for France get sold, the rights for the UK get sold, and what gets sold are distribution rights that allow the buyer could be a network station, a studio, a mini major studio, a platform, allows the buyer to distribute the movie in their territory, meaning in that country. That's what international sales are. International sales do not include the US. That's why they're called international. So it's basically the whole rights bucket, excluding the United States. And the reason why I usually exclude the United States in all my finance plan is because it is a very volatile territory to pre-sale. Volatile meaning it's difficult to pre-sale. In my movies, and I've done a bunch, I don't think I was ever able to pre-sell the US. I always sold the US after the movie was finished. And then I sold it mainly to major studios or mini major studios or Netflix. But it usually happened after the movie was finished. And that happens for a lot of producers, actually, because the domestic market is very unpredictable. So you would also not include that domestic market in your early finance plans. But we are assuming here that the US rights are being sold after the movie has been finished, which is why you see here the 20% of the budget. This will happen after the movie is finished. Now, international sales estimates are projections. They're not sales. I'm sorry, let me just take a sip of water. So what that means is that you get your sales agent to put together an Excel spreadsheet for you that tells you exactly how much he believes he can sell the movie in France for, or how much he believes he can sell the movie in England for. So he puts together a sales estimate sheet that has all these different countries on it and a number next to it, which is his estimate of what the license fee will be that he can get for you. I have a frog in my stomach, so sorry. So these are estimates, these are not sales. Now, when we go to pre-sales, these are actual sales. Now we're taking from the bucket of a sales estimates a portion away because we're now pre-selling some of these rights from our international sales bucket. So estimates now become actual sales. They become actual distribution sales. And they're basically nothing else than distribution sales that happen before you start shooting your movie. That's why they're called pre-sales. The name is only because you're selling them before you're making the movie, the end. But they're the same sales. They're done just before. And what you do with these distribution contracts in order for you to do something with them, because when the distributor buys a territory from you, they're not actually paying you anything other than the down payment. And we'll get into the down payment in the next case study, not this one. But all you get when you sell your movie, for example, to Germany is a 20% down payment. Let's say you sell the movie for $1 million to Germany, they give you $200,000. Well, you can't do much with that. You will, of course, use it for your finance plan, but in the ideal world, you want the entire amount. So what you do with that country, with that contract from Germany, is you take it to the bank, and the bank will actually give you a loan for this. So that's your pre-sale loan. They look at the deal and say, oh, it's Germany, it's Constantine Film, great. We'll give you the $1 million as a loan. And when you deliver the movie after you've shot it and you deliver it to the German distributor through your sales agent, that's when Germany pays you, and they pay then the bank or the collection agent. So the contract is assigned over to the bank, and they will be the ones receiving the payment that is due on that contract. When you do international sales estimates and you pre-sale, in our case, 35%, you're left with the rights you haven't sold yet. You have estimates, you do pre-sales, you're left with rights you haven't sold yet. So those rights are called your unsold rights. And they are also worth money for you because they represent a bucket the bank will also give you a loan against. Now, while the first loan is a loan against assets, meaning your contracts, the second loan is a loan against unsold rights, meaning there is no asset behind it. It's just an estimate that the bank will undertake by looking at your unsold rights and looking at your sales agent. So the most important thing for you to remember is only work with a sales agent that is actually bankable, because otherwise your entire finance plan will not be workable for you. And believe it or not, many sales agents are not bankable with entertainment banks in the US. This kind of loan is mainly available in the US. It's not so much available in like Germany or other countries. There are, however, entertainment lending institutions that are not banks, that are like, you know, entertainment funds, for lack of a better word, in other countries that will do this kind of loan as well. So while the banks in those countries will not do them, these lending institutions will do them. And they will also do them for you here in the US. And we'll talk about some of these in a minute. But the main thing to remember here is, remember the bucket that you have available for unsold rights, because you're going to get a loan against 50% of that value up to 20% of your budget. So if you have a budget, for example, that's $10 million, your unsold rights are $3 million for some reason, the bank loan would only be $2 million because it caps out at 20%. So no matter how many unsold rights you have available, just know you will never get more from a bank than 20% of your budget. Okay, so let's dive into it. Some of you made this, took this case study assignment. We had a budget that was $11 million. We are assuming our international sales estimates are 75%. That would be $8,250,000 with pre-sales applicable here. Sales we made, the sales agent made, were 35% of the budget, which is $8,850,000. So when we deduct the $3,850,000 from the $8,250,000, we get to unsold rights of $4,400,000. That's our unsold rights bucket, so let's keep that in mind. And we are assuming and hoping, and we will have $2,200,000, 20% of the budget coming from the US. So the first step is your valuation. You basically put together, what is the value of my project? What does it look like? So that would be the first step you take in putting together your film. In the next step, you put together your senior loan, which is the pre-sale and gap loan. Remember, we had pre-sales of 3.850 million.
Deixa eu te falar, meu.
Tássia,
Se fazer alguma coisa hoje, me liga, hein? Eu tô por aí, hein? Beleza? A Ju tá falando que você vai ter aula até tarde aí.
Okay, I'm gonna mute. Bye-bye. Sorry. All right, guys. Whoever's not muted, mute yourself. Let me see who else is not muted. I'm gonna mute them. Okay. All right, everyone else is good. Okay, moving on. So we had pre-sales of 3.850 million. We had unsold rights of 4.4 million. Now our collateral for the bank is going to be 2.2 million because it's 50% of that. So that will be our gap loan. So altogether we get a bank loan of 6.5 million. Again, this is a loan against the rights that you have pre-sold and against the rights you haven't sold yet. Okay? Hold on a second. Are people not seeing the PowerPoint? You guys not seeing the PowerPoint? I can't see it.
Yes, we do.
We can see it.
You can see it? You
Yes,
can or you cannot?
We can see it.
Someone cannot, because I'm seeing here someone, I can't. Mandy, you can't? Mandy doesn't. Everyone else can. Mandy, I don't know what's going on with your computer, but if everyone else can, then it must be something on your end.
I'll figure it out. Keep going. I'm sorry. I don't know what.
No worries. I'm
okay.
looking at this. As I mentioned, the chat is on another window, so I'm looking at my PowerPoint.
Oh, okay.
I'm not looking at the chat.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I just don't see a split screen. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone can see the PowerPoint. I'm going to work through it. Everyone, if anyone has anything else that they can't see or can't do or can't hear, then you can bark at me because I'm not paying attention too much to the chat. All right, moving on. So we got a bank loan. Again, bank loan is against pre-sales and against rights you haven't sold. That's your first step. The next step that we're dealing with is the production incentive. The production incentive is pretty straightforward. If you shoot in any territory like Georgia, New Mexico, you know about this, or you shoot in a country that offers production incentives, what that means is you go to a country or a territory or a state in the US, you are producing your movie there, you're spending money in that territory, and the territory is very happy and says, we'll give you money back because you came here and you spent money. You spend $1 million, we'll give you $200 back. That's kind of the concept. Now, this concept's great, but it doesn't really help you if you're trying to get this money before you actually spent $1 there yet. So the trick around this little situation is you get someone to lend you money against the incentive you will be having. So what you do is you take your budget, you have someone give you, it's usually a local accountant or a production line producer from the local territory. They give you an estimate of what the eligible costs are, because not everything is always subject to an incentive, just to forewarn you. In this case, we make it easy. We're saying the entire budget is an eligible expense. In reality, that's not really the case. In reality, the eligible expenses are very specialized and they are subject to the local regulations. So what you would do is you probably would talk to the local film office or the local regulation office and asking them, what of my budget is actually eligible here? And the easy way to do it, by the way, is go on a website called Entertainment Partners. They have an incentive map, and it tells you exactly what incentives are available in the US and outside of the US and what the regulations are. And I'm gonna, by the way, put that in the module. I think it is actually in the module. So that's an easy way to start with incentives. Now, again, what do? We haven't shot the movie there, but what are we gonna do now? We know we're gonna shoot it in, let's say, Georgia, which has a larger incentive, by the way, than 20%, but right now we're just assuming it's 20. This estimate that we're putting together for the production cost that we will be spending, that we're estimating to be spending in the region, will be handed over to a lender. And that lender looks at the estimate and says, all right, I'll cash flow this for you. They usually charge a fee. In our example, we keep it simple. We're not putting the fee in. In the next case study we're doing, we are putting it in. But for now, let's just assume you're getting the entire amount through a lender. And that will enable you to use the money before you actually shoot the movie and to use it to cover your production costs. And you kind of always want to do that because there is another reason. These incentive regions, and you've probably seen this, they change their regulations all the time. Like when I shot my movie with Jason Statham in New York, I think I got 25% out of there. And I was lucky because I got a loan from a company called 120dB to cash flow this tax credit. While we were shooting, New York changed their repayment structure in saying, okay, fine, you shoot your movie here. Usually you would do the tax return after you shot the movie, and with the tax return of the end of the year, you tell us how much you spent and you put the rebate in the tax return, and based on that tax return, we pay you. Well, now New York said, we're not going to pay you right away. We're going to divide your payment into 5 installments every year. So now you have to wait 5 years to get the money from New York. I mean, how does that make sense? Wasn't my problem, was my incentive lender's problem. So the changing regulations could be a problem for you if you are subject to them. That's why I like cash flowing all my tax credits up front, because then I don't have to deal with these changing regulations or waiting for a state or country to give me the money. I don't have to deal with any of it. I get my money up front, I go make my movie, everyone's happy. You are paying, of course, a little premium for that, but it's really worth the headache. In my personal opinion, you can do what you want, but in my personal opinion, it's good to use it up front. So that's a little story about that. Once we put our finance plans in motion, our bank loan, our production incentive, we usually use the equity to cover the balance. And when I talk about equity, and I'll go into the finance plan later, there is a reason why I suggest the equity to be kept at a certain number. Now, in our case, we have equity here, we have the production incentive here, we have a senior loan here, and we have our production budget funded. Fantastic. So what does it look like when we go into the recoupment? In the recoupment, what happens now after you make the movie is you get all the money in. We are assuming we're actually making the sales of the international distribution revenues that we have estimated. We make exactly what we were hoping to make. That's great. We get our US sale in because now the movie's finished, so the US is very happy to buy it. And now our entire worldwide distribution revenues for this movie look like they are $10,450,000. So you see already here, it's less than the production cost, because the production costs were $1 million. And you're going to be facing this issue. I just let you know. You will have a situation where your worldwide revenues might be less than what you're actually spending. And that's a very reason why you always want to include some non-recoupable finance components like production incentives, like brand integration, like deferments, in-kind services. We will talk about all of those in a minute. But just money that you don't have to pay back, for a long story short, okay? So now it comes time to pay some people. The collection agent who is responsible to take all the revenues in from all the distribution sales that were made into this one account that's a neutral account that collects all the revenues in one space is now having the job to pay everyone and to pay back your loan, your sales agent, and so forth. Everyone is paid by the collection agent. You don't have to do anything if you employ a collection agent. It's a beautiful thing. They do a lot of other beautiful things, which I talk about in a minute. The sales agent would like to get paid their 12% sales agency fee, which is 12% of the rights that they've sold. In our case, they sold everything. The sales agent will also charge for some expenses, which is 1% of what they have sold. And then we pay our bank back and we pay our equity back, and we have a total expense column of $10,263,000, which leaves us with a net revenue of $187,000. So this is how we got to the $187,000. I know some of you had landed at a different number. So if that's not the number you have, I will just email me. I'll text you this as an Excel spreadsheet so you can go through it and we can ask questions in a minute. But that's for the assignment now. I'd like to now, if you let me, I'd like to jump into module 2, which is a little more of a creative conversation. We'll talk about the assignment that I just mentioned in a minute, because I'm going to go to a different one and then we'll combine them. So let's switch off your brain as it relates to money. Let's move into module 3, where we talk about some creative things. The module 3 will open up on Monday, so I'll give you a summary of what I think is important for you to just focus on. And the reason why I'd like you to keep this in mind, because these things will help you get your project greenlit. So when we're talking about a story and the way a story is told, in this case, I'm referring to a globally viable story. So we're talking about a story that is aimed to be sold all over the world. Because when you do a story for a certain territory, like if you're French and you do a movie in France, you tell the story a little different. If you do a movie in Germany, you tell the story also a little different. Like, for example, in Germany, people usually die at the end or they kill themselves. So it's not really a Hollywood ending. So there are different cultures associated. Oh, in, let's say China, the stories are long, and in India, they take 5 hours. So it's the stories, when they're made for a specific market, they respond to the local storytelling structures. Now, if we're talking about, and this course is all about global content that can travel all over the world, then this kind of structure would apply. And someone, I would think, fairly smart, Sid Field, summed it down for me in a way that helped me work with my writers, and when I write, to really cut this down into a nearly mathematic way to get the story structured. When you read a script, you'll notice that certain things happen at a certain time. And when you look at the structure here, you will, reading the script, hopefully notice that's what's going to apply. There is a first act in your script. The script usually for a movie is about 120 pages. Could be less, could be more, but that's kind of the roundabout number. When you read the first 30 pages, you'll notice that at the end of that first act, the character is in despair. The problem of the movie is being shown. The character is introduced, and it's introduced in an ideally way that shows you the character has a multifaceted personality, dealing with a complex problem that looks like is not going to be easily solved. The first act is your exposition act. It's your setup for the entire movie. Now, when you read a script in the first act, you cannot visualize that main actor. And when I mean visualize, I literally mean you have someone in front of you that wears a certain kind of clothes, that has a certain kind of look, reminds you of a certain person, has a certain kind of demeanor to it. When you read that first act and you don't get that visual right away, I can tell you something is wrong with the character. That character is not set up right because you're not able to connect with them. So you need to go into the script and find out, what am I not seeing with this person? What am I missing? What in the motivation is not translating? What is with the description that I'm not seeing a clear picture of this person? So just keep in mind the first 30 pages are really there to introduce you to that character, and that character has to come to life in flesh and blood. Now, the other thing is, when you read that first 30 pages and you see something or notice things that remind you of something else, like the first 30 pages remind you of a movie that opened the same way or had the same kind of problem that they dealt with in the movie. If that happens, it's time to change the first act, because you're now working on a project that is similar to another project, which is already a problem. There is nothing wrong with being similar to a genre. Like when we do a romantic comedy, obviously we know the guy gets the girl in the end, but the idea here is, how does the guy get the girl in the end? And I hopefully be taken on a journey that will take me to surprising twists and turns that I haven't seen before in a romantic comedy. So the same applies here. You want to see something that's fresh already in the first 30 pages, because these first 30 pages is all most executives will ever read. I'm sorry to tell you, I don't read more than 30 pages of any script I get. If it's not there, I'm gonna already put it away, because it's gonna be too much work to fix this. I'm being very harsh here, but many executives get a lot of scripts on their plate. So you need to capture them literally in the first minutes they have. They need to open a script and need to say, holy moly, this is grabbing me. Wendy actually sent me a script, which was funny. And I was in there, like the first 30 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And she wrote it. And she said, it's one of my first scripts I wrote. And it was so good. I was like, oh my God, I want to go on this journey. So when the first 30 pages are great, you'll be able and forgive if there's a little slowness happening in the second or the third act, because you know you can work on that. There is room to improve. Now, what happens in the second act? In the second act, you build out the confrontation. So the problem that was set up in the first act is now going to be worked on in the second act. But it's not just going to be with solving a problem. In the midpoint, meaning page 60 roundabout, you're going to twist that whole thing around in a way that the audience cannot predict what's happening. So your job is to start solving a problem for the next 30 pages in Act 2. And then you hit them with a midpoint that takes the story in a different direction that is not predictable. My husband, Jim, hates it when I watch a movie or TV show with him, because I always know what happens next. And you don't want that to be happening to anyone, or I should say most of the time I know what's happening next, but it's because I do and read so many stories. But the executives, they do too. The executives like me, they read hundreds of scripts and they don't want to see something where they can predict what's happening next. So in the midpoint, your job and the writer that you work with, their job is to twist that thing all around in a way that no one can expect. So now the second part of the third act will work on the twist that you created at midpoint. Towards the end of the second act, you give us another plot point surprise where you say, well, you thought this is how we're going to solve this problem. I'm going to throw the actor in the dirt again. And this is going to be the plot 2. It's going to be starting my climax. This is a situation that you were describing as something that's going to be very hard to figure out. And it seems to be impossible for the character to solve. You just have to drive it really hard with your writer. If you're the writer, just remember this. Make it so that I as the reader cannot see how they could ever get out of the situation. So the climax and the last act is not going up and down. The climax is going up, 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 up until about page, if we have 120 pages, let's say page 115, and then you crash me down into the last 5 pages where you solve everything. And when I say solve everything, I really mean solve everything. A satisfying ending. It's very important. How many times have you seen a season and it goes to the end of the season, you're like, I can't believe this is such a lame ending of that season, the cliffhanger. I want all that time back that I watched this whole season for. This is a situation you don't want to be facing. Or you watch the movie and the end is lame and you don't feel satisfied. So you want to do 2 things. You want to give satisfaction on the level of the character, that the development that they have undergone on a personal level because they have a personal journey that goes in line with the journey of the story, but it doesn't always have to match. It just means that they have to overcome something personally that is important for them to be at the end an elevated person. This elevation of character needs to be round at the end, and that's what you need to focus on. If your character starts at A in Act 1 and is not somewhere at B and roundabout, you're missing something. You need to work on the character again. So just think about it like a life journey where you want to give someone, you give someone a birth, you're birthing this character and you're basically raising him through your movie or your TV show. And in the end, he's going to be an adult. So that's how you have to think about the character. Now, when we talk about characters, they have to be structured in a way that they're very unique. The story and the character have to ideally be new, fresh. So when I talk about characters that are new and fresh, sounds so vague, I'm talking about someone who is painted as a good person, but also have a lot of negative traits to them. Someone that is painted as the villain, but has a lot of positive traits to them. So you want to give them a multifaceted personality that gives, of course, your reader the possibility to connect to them. They still need to understand why they are who they are and why they do what they do. But you want to make it so colorful that it's not so easy to like fully like them. It's not so easy to like fully hate them. So you want to give your audience a little bit of an edge in saying, you know what, you're not just going to easily connect and think they're all great and one-dimensional. They're not. They're multidimensional characters. They're real-life people. Every one of us has a dark side and a bright side, and that's something that you want to integrate in this character. And when we talk about a story, twists and turns that are not foreseen is one thing, but also taking these inspiring and satisfying characters on a journey that is fresh and new on how you tell the story. This is all about how. Yes, if you do a thriller, someone's going to die, some problem is going to get solved, the world's going to get saved. It's always that. But you want to be inventive about how you do that. So when you put a story together, it doesn't matter if it's a romantic comedy, a drama, or a thriller, action, or sci-fi, whatever the genre is, this applies for all genres throughout. It even applies for documentaries, by the way, because even if it's a real story, a story that's based on truth, the still story elements apply there because I'm watching something that I want to engage with. So even if it's a true story about someone, I still want to be taken on a ride that I want to be engaged with and that is interesting. The other thing you want to make sure is that you understand who your target audience is. Now, there are certain audiences that work financially if it's a limited audience. So when I say limited audience, I'm talking about like an R-rated movie could be applicable for the horror genre or the elevated horror genre. there it's okay to limit your audience to an R-rated audience because it's kind of a sales estimate, a sales element you can use. A horror movie that's not R-rated is usually not, you know, attracting many people because they want to be seeing people being slashed up and things. So that usually doesn't happen with a PG-13 movie. So in that genre, I would say that's the only genre where I would limit it to R. And that's me giving you my personal advice. It's not, you know, anyone else's. I like doing movies that are PG-13 and not limiting myself because I can make more money with them. A movie that is not limited to an R audience will allow me to be sold wider globally because many countries limiting, I have limits in relation to what they can air on television. So certain things that are creating an R rating for a certain country, you just need to know about. There are things, for example, if I do a PG movie and, well, that wouldn't be the case, but let's say in my PG movie, there would be alcohol consumption or something. There are certain countries that would take this and make this automatically an R rated. So you need to be careful in understanding from your sales agent, how do you screw up your rating? If you change your script in a certain way, how do you screw that up by putting stuff in there that could make it potentially an R rated movie in certain territories? So in many cases, what is a PG movie here, PG-13 in that case, or PG, is usually workable like that in other countries too, but you want to reconfirm that. So to make a long story short, what sells the best all over the world is action and thriller. Could also be sci-fi, action, thriller. Those are the genres that sell the easiest and sell the best. It gets a little harder when it's comedy. When it's romantic comedy, you want to think about romantic comedy with lead actors that people know. So with an A-level actor in a comedy, you have an easier time to sell it globally. It gets harder when we talk about period drama. That for some reason, I don't know why, because I like period drama, but for some reason it's harder to sell internationally. I never really cracked that nut as to why that is. I just see it when I see the sales come in, that I'm doing myself a disfavor doing period dramas. However, I still do them because I just now work on a television series that's a period drama. So for television, it's a little different because they somewhat allow it more, but for a feature film, it becomes harder to do. There are certain genres that work well when they are executed well, and that's the horror genre. The elevated horror genre, or the horror genre in general, if you want to make money with it, you want to work with people that have a track record as it relates to directing them, writing and directing them. So you want to not use a first-time director for a horror movie. In fact, I would always stay away for your first movie from a first-time director. That's a different situation. But in general, the horror genre specifically is driven by execution. So there, even if you have good cast, you still want to have a strong director so that the buyer knows it's going to get that tingle that sells horror. And it's very hard to sell that on the script and just through the cast attachment. So it really is sold through the execution, through the director. When we talked about sales estimates earlier in pre-sales, I just want to say that the pre-sale market in general has changed quite a bit. In the movies that are produced just a few years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I was able to pre-sell 50 to like 80, sometimes even 100% of my budget. So I was able to get enough distribution contracts upfront to cover my cost for my movie. That has changed drastically, especially in the last few years with the disruption created by our platforms. So right now we're dealing with pre-sales being much harder to be accomplished. However, if you're not able, or if a piece of content is not able to sell at least a third of the budget internationally, you're putting yourself in a difficult position, because this signals to you that this movie is not really meeting the demand in the global audience. It's the first indication that the movie is not being accepted by the marketplace. So you need to be careful and figure out why that is. It could be that maybe the movie is too expensive and you're not reaching the price level. It could be that the script is not quite there. It could be that the cast level and the director are not really interesting enough. Any of those things you need to pay attention to and change. If you're seeing you're not making pre-sales, you need to talk to openly to your sales agent openly about that. But you have to also think about the fact that if you ignore this and you just do the movie anyway, and you say, I don't care about pre-sales, I'm just going to do it, I know I'm going to sell it afterwards, just know that the buyers in these various countries, they will talk to each other. There's a handful of strong buyers in every country, a handful. And they will say, oh, remember Albert, for example, since I see you there, Albert did that movie. We didn't buy it when it was pitched to us with the sales agent. So now he's going to have to sell it. So what are you going to pay for it? What are you thinking of offering? Oh, 500? Well, maybe we'll all go down to 400 and then we split the goods. So these people talk to each other because they know that you now have to and must sell your movie at this point. So they're likely going to try to lowball you, which will basically screw with your profits. So taking that risk is not an ideal situation for your investor and for you if you want to make a profit with your movie. Just keep that in mind. Now, creating a buzz online for movies that are lower budget, I think is really important, because even if you don't need a crowdfunding, finance source. Let's say you don't need crowdfunding. You don't care. You don't need crowdfunding. You don't need crowdsourcing. You have your money. You still want to do a little crowdfunding campaign if you have a low budget movie, because it creates awareness and a buzz about your project. It creates a want. People talk about it. Oh, this movie's coming out. Did you hear about it? And that is a measurable value for you. So you can take that value to a potential buyer like a platform, and they love this kind of buzz because they're driven by the online audience. So if you're creating an online buzz with a crowdfunding campaign or crowdsourcing campaign, that buzz and that measurable attraction that you can see is being created with your content online is a sales tool for you to sell it to especially to a buyer who has an online platform. So let's talk about how you secure yourself when working with content. If you write the script yourself, it's straightforward. You obviously register it with the WGA, and you also register it with the Copyright Office. If you're a producer who has a friend who wrote a script, that's beautiful. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to have that friend of yours sign an option agreement. And I don't care how well you know these people that you work with, and I don't care how great the story sounds, you will do an option agreement. A little piece of paper that says, I, the producer, own the right for a period of time to put this movie together. And that period of time for an option agreement usually starts at about a year, and you pay a few bucks for it, and it will extend, give you the option to extend, if you want to extend it, for another year. So that kind of gives you 2 years of putting this project together the way you want to put it together. And it's important for you to have the right to do that, because the minute you start packaging your project, the minute you start getting interest from investors, you want to be sure you control all rights. And when I say all rights, I also mean the underlying rights. So let's say, for example, the writer that you work with gave you the script, and they had the script before with another production company. And the script was optioned by them for a year. And they went ahead and they did a budget, they did some location scouting, they may have started to do some packaging. All that, of course, costs money. So here's what the production company does. They will put this on the IP, on this script, basically as a turnaround fee, which means it's a cost that is associated to the IP, and it travels with the IP. So now you come along and say, oh, you did this with participant and they didn't make it. Well, let me talk to them to see what kind of turnaround fees are associated with this project, so I see if I can even afford this. So now you call in participant and they say, yeah, we did this, we developed a bit on this, and we had some costs, and it's $500,000 that we spent, and then we decided we're not going to do it. And you now say, okay, well, how much of the $500,000 do I have to pay you for you to release the chain of title to me? And they'll usually negotiate with you. But it is important that you ask the writer who gives you a script, have you pitched this anywhere else? Has this been optioned by anyone else? A production company, a studio, a network? Who had this story before? So that's number one. You want to know the chain of title, the chain of who owned the script at whatever point. And that goes for any piece of content. The script, a Bible for a show, whatever it is based on something. And that idea is what you need to secure. So let's say you want to do a TV series based on a book, could be, or a movie based on a book, obviously you would call the publisher and say, can I get an option to put this story for the book together as a movie or as a TV series? And then the book publisher will do some kind of a deal with you. If you work with a writer who wrote a script already based on a book or based on something, could be based on a video game, could be based on a true story of someone's life, could be based on something underlying. Your job is to make sure that you don't just option the rights from the writer who has the script, but also from the person who controls the underlying rights. Because believe you me, it's not automatically the case that the writer that you option the script from also controls the rights for the underlying property. So this is something you keep in mind. In this option agreement, you agree to a few things. You agree to the option fee. You also agree to what you pay for when it comes to rewrites. You also agree to the purchase price of the script. In the end of the day, an option is just the right to put something together. It doesn't give you the entire rights of the script yet. The entire rights for the script you pay for when you start your production. But you need to know how much that is because you need to put it in the budget, obviously, and you want to be okay with that number. You want to agree that number already when you do the option agreement because you don't want to be fighting over it later. So the option agreement will include what is called a purchase price for the rights for the script. So let's say you do a movie, $1 million movie, and you have a writer who is a WGA, meaning Writers Guild writer. In that case, you're going to go to the Writers Guild website and you see, okay, that $1 million movie, how much money should I be spending for the script and for the option? And it's literally right there on the website. It gives you the minimums. You can use the Writers Guild minimums as a negotiation tool with that writer. If the writer is not a Writers Guild member, you can still use the Writers Guild minimums. I do all the time with people that are not WGA members because I work with people from Europe. They're not in the WGA. So I say to them, if I want to do this and I want to do all the hard work, I want to use Writers Guild minimum as the payment for the option and the script. Obviously, you can pay less than that if it's a non-WGA writer because if they're non-WGA, it's really up to you what you negotiate. But you want to negotiate whatever the purchase price is along some kind of a level that relates to the budget. And we'll be talking about that in a minute. But just keep in mind that the WGA's website can really be helpful in just giving you an idea what you should be paying for a script or what you could be paying for a script. And try to stay under that or maybe not more than that. So the chain of title we talked about, you need to make sure the chain of title is clear. These chain of title reports are like, you can compare them to like when you buy a house, when they do a title report on a house. What else is going on with the house? Are there any liens? That title report company will figure all that out. There is a company that does this for IPs, for creative IPs. One company I use because they're quick and they're inexpensive is Angel and Partners. It's in the module, so don't worry about it. You don't need to write anything down, by the way. All of this is in the modules that we're talking about here today. So they do a complete chain of title. So if the writer that you work with wasn't forward, for lack of a better word, didn't tell you all the things that might have happened, this chain of title report will reveal everything. Another thing I want to talk to you about when it comes to rights. When we put together a script and we talk to the writer about the script and we do development, sometimes we include other people. Maybe there is a co-producer you work with and they have ideas. Maybe there is the writer's wife that has ideas. All of this, by the way, happened to me. So I'm giving you examples that actually happened to me. So the script was, with another producer at some point, they gave some ideas. In this case, maybe this producer gave the idea of a scene. Oh, this bathtub scene is my scene, and I also developed the fight scene and this blow-up scene and da-da-da-da-da. So they gave ideas. And you have to remember that anyone who develops the story with you could potentially have a claim. This literally happened to me where someone who had the script for 5 minutes, maybe changed 3 sentences in it, contacts me and says, by the way, I had the script and we did some development on it and I want to get paid for that work. And I ended up paying this man $75,000, not kidding, on a movie that I made for, I think it was 15 or something around that. $75,000 I could have used for something else, really didn't want to pay that. So if I would have done the following, if I would have had everyone who gives me an idea sign a waiver that says, any idea you give me, I say, thank you very much, but you're waiving all rights, perfect. So anyone you work with on the development of your script, just put a little waiver together saying, whatever we work with together, whatever input you're providing, you're waiving all rights of owning any relation to the IP or owning anything of the script. Just do that for good housekeeping. I can tell you that it happened to me twice, that it cost me a lot of money, and I know what I'm doing. So if it happens to me, it can happen to everyone. So these are the important things I want to just point out. When we talk about how to get a project on screen, we need to value the project first. We need to figure out what's the value, how do I create value to it. A script alone is okay. I mean, the script obviously has to be very good, but it's not really possible for anyone to put a value on that story and on that project unless they know who the director is and who the cast is. Sounds logical. So your job is to start talking to directors early on. If this is your first project that you're putting together, please do yourself a favor and work with a director that has done something. Even if it's just one film. Ideally, you want to work with a director that has done more than one film. Ideally, you want to work with a director who has done something that actually has some measurable success, because it's going to make your life a lot easier. It will also be a compliment to you, because it shows you if a director of a higher level attaches to your story, that you really have a good story. So why would you work on something that is mediocre? You don't want to waste all your time with that. You want something really good. And if you have something really good, like a great story, you will find a great director. So don't be shy about going online. Stupid thing, IMDb. I literally placed a few directors on my movies just by going on IMDb and calling them and saying, here's a script, I want to do it, what do you think? So don't be shy about that stuff. So just look, okay, what director would be ideal? What have they done that's in the same range, genre-wise, in the same budget range, approximately, and was that successful? So pick and choose and talk to some directors and say, here's what I have, what do you think? You will also talk to them about your cast ideas. So when you put together your business plan, you'll learn about this, you put together the cast that you envision. You don't have to necessarily have them all, signed up yet, because it's probably not going to happen at that point. But you'll want to talk to the director about the cast you envision, and here's why. If you do cast first, director later, and the director doesn't like the cast, it's already a problem in the visions that are not matching. Your director and the changes that he makes to your project and the changes he makes to your script, they need to go in line with your vision. The cast is part of that. And the vision is important to go in line with, for the following example. Let's say you do an action thriller. And let's say the director says to you, here, I'm going to do some changes in the script, and I'm going to make the characters really talk more about the issue. Now, the minute you hear talk more about an issue, the genre could shift to a drama, because action is driven by action, 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 action. Yes, of course, characters talk about an issue. Yes, of course, we have some talking head situations in there because there's some dialogue going on. But the genre itself is driven by a fast-pacedness. If you slow that down for expositional purposes, now you're putting more drama in, more backstory for the character. The genre could slightly shift and become a drama. There could still be action in it, but it could slightly shift. Now, if you make pre-sales with the promise of delivering action to your buyers, and you start talking to a director who wants to change the genre, you're in trouble, because that will give reason to the buyers that bought your action script to basically cancel your contract, and your entire finance plan is blowing up. And I'm giving you this example because it actually happened to me. So you want to make sure that the director's vision and his changes for the script do not change the script in its material way. So meaning the main characters are not all of a sudden becoming different. The story is not all of a sudden changing, and the pace is not all of a sudden slowing down. Have these honest conversations early on and understand the tendencies your directors is already alerting you to. Make sure you get that down. And put it in writing. Put it in writing with the director's agreement to say the genre is this, the budget is that, director, you are comfortable with both, sign here. And the cast that we envision is this, and director, you are comfortable with that kind of cast level, sign here. And the last part you have to do in the director agreement, that's a bit of a painful situation, but you have to put it in. If you attach cast that will not approve your director, and sometimes that happens too, where the cast says, yeah, I'm interested in the script, and just when you send it to the agents, but I really don't like the director, but you really want that cast member, you have to make a decision. Is the cast more important than the director? There are many directors, but high-level cast usually values more in the value chain. So you have to be able to let the director go if the cast does not approve the director. So you have to put the passes in the director's agreement that you can replace him. So when I talk about budget feasibility, what I really mean is that the balance between above the line, which is all the line items that include your actors, the director, the producer, and the rights, has a balance in relation to the below the line, which includes all the physical production elements. And the reason why we want to make sure that that happens is because at the end of the day, you're going to be dealing with what is called a completion bond company. If you have financing from a bank, you will have a completion bond insurance on your movie because the bank will not give you money unless you do have a completion bond insurance on your movie. In the completion bond, their job is to protect you and protect the project from budget overages, and they ensure the on-time and on-budget production of the project. So the completion bond company will look at your budget in detail, look at the script in detail, talk to the director about the vision in detail, and figure out if they feel the budget is feasible. And so therefore, you're going to be beholden to the completion bond company in the end in trying to figure out, is this actually the budget I need to be able to make the movie? So they'll have a conversation with you about it, just to keep that in mind. So when you package your director, you do it first. You talk about the vision, you talk about the budget with the director, you're very upfront, and then you attach the director, the cast later. The way you attach the cast is you're going to put together what is called a pay or play. That is, in essence, a firm commitment that you're giving to a cast member to hire them and pay them. So a pay or play deal, a pay or play offer would say, and it's sent with your script to the agency, it would say, "Dear Halle Berry, I would like you to be in this movie Dark Tide. I would like you to play the role of Kate, which is the leading role. I will give you $2 million, and you're going to be shooting in this period of time in this location in Cape Town." So all the things of the movie, the specific things will be in this pay or play offer. The director is going to be this, the producer is going to be that, the budget is going to be round about this, and the shooting period is going to be about that time. So you need to kind of know approximately where things happen. You've also put in a window that says the shooting start could be 2 weeks or 3 weeks earlier or later. Usually it's later. And it could go on longer. So you give yourself a little window in the front and the back so you can move stuff around. And you have to know that that $2 million, if you don't make that movie, are still your liability. So when you make these pay or play offers, you have early conversations with investors. And the job of this investor, the early investor, it's probably an equity investor, will be to back this offer. The equity investor will understand that you're creating value by attaching Halle Berry to your movie. And that with Halle Berry, you will have a movie, you will have a project because all of the things fall into place. The sales agent told you what the movie is worth with Halle Berry. You know that the sales agent says, I'm going to easily sell a third of the budget with Halle Berry in the movie. And you get feedback from the market, from your sales agent early on that this is a valuable project. And you have that conversation with the equity investor and saying, my sales agent is valuing the project as X. With Halle Berry, we can make about this amount of money. And when you back the pay or play offer, this is going to create this value to the project. You obviously will always tell your investor, you can lose all your money. There is no scenario in this industry that will protect you from losing all your money. It just is. But your job as the producer is to mitigate those risks. And these mitigation strategies on how you can protect your investor and how you can mitigate the various risks that exist in our industry is a lot of what you learn about in this course, and we'll talk a little bit today. But the main risk mitigation element for you is your sales agent and your pre-sales. Those are the and the production incentives. Those are the first important risk mitigation steps you will be taking, and you'll see that. Who is not muted? Hold on, let me see here. Da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da. Looks like everyone's muted. Okay. I'm not seeing who's not muted. Okay, I think we're good. So anyone who's not muted, please mute yourselves. Thank you. So that pay or play offer, again, is your responsibility, and you want to have it backed by an equity investor. When we talk about the balance in your budget and what it would look like, it's obviously very much driven by the actual project. If it's a low budget movie with B-level actors, it's going to look a little different. Your above the line is going to be much lower. Your below the line percentage is higher. If you're looking at a global movie that has a global audience, like the movies that I produce, they're usually in the $10 to $25 million range. I have a 50-50 range. I have 50% above the line and 50% below the line, because I usually have expensive talent, because it drives the value of my movie, and my below the line is usually at around 50%. So it really depends on what kind of movie it is. But this is kind of a range that just gives you an idea of what could happen. The post-production, depending on if it's a science fiction or a movie that has a lot of visual effects components to it, should be anywhere from 10 to 30%. It will be higher if you have a visual effects driven movie. Visual effects are expensive and they drive the post-production budget up. So the post-production will likely be much more than 30% if you have a very heavy visual effects driven film. Now in the budget, when we look at the various areas of the budget, the rights we talked about earlier, your development cost, your rights fee for the writer, maybe you have some underlying rights that you need to pay for. There should be somewhere in this percentage of 1 to 4%. Could be a little more sometimes, depending on if you buy a book rights of a very famous book, it could probably be a little more. But that's kind of the normal range. The producers and overhead, when I say producers and overhead, it includes the producer fee plus your production fee, like an overhead fee. The overhead fee is usually around 5%, producers fees are usually around 10%. If it's very, very, very low and you do a very low budget movie, you're on the lower end with 3%. I've not really seen a movie that has a 3% producer fee, but when like some students send me their projects, I usually keep the producer fee low, which I think is very smart to get their first project made. If you hit the 15% bracket, I can tell you already now that the completion bond company will likely ask you to defer some of this into a fund that's held by the completion bond and is given to you after you deliver the movie on budget. So while you can put the 15% in there, just be aware that the completion bond companies probably take part of that out to be paid to you later. And that's also the reason why you want to put it in there. So put it in there, make your fees high, because know that the completion bond company is going to take part of it and put it in the back. So just be aware of that. When I talk about marketing and publicity here, I'm not talking about P&A. In your first module, you saw when we talked about the Harry Potter example, how expensive the print and advertising campaign can be. Print and advertising, that word really doesn't exist anymore because today everything is digital, but it speaks for the releasing campaign around a movie that creates awareness about a movie and its global release. And that can be extremely expensive, as you saw from Harry Potter. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is marketing and publicity, which has to do with a little bit of marketing you do, like your trailer that you shoot to, if you have a trailer, maybe you have a mood trailer or something, or later you have a trailer when you start selling the movie, that you shoot and show the buyers at the film markets, the posters, the artwork, the payments you make to be at the Cannes Film Festival, maybe some publicity work you do early to have some press junkets show up on set. So the little publicity work you do in order to create a little awareness about your project, that's covered here in the 1 to 3% point. The insurance on your movie and the completion bond company fee should be somewhere between 1.5 and 3%. And I should say here, because we're dealing with COVID right now, this number will likely go up. It is not known yet what it goes up to, but we already know that the insurance companies will put in certain regulations for us in order to be able to insure our projects. So they will likely add to their fee. So just be aware that this might go up, and you might have an additional fee that relates to this kind of budget line item that has to do with a COVID specialist who we likely all have to hire. It's a great job, by the way. No, I think one of us in the course, I saw someone who is a COVID specialist, very excited. I'm gonna have to talk to them after this. Anyway, so this little area here will likely go up a little bit. Now, when I talk about legal and finance fees, legal fees have to do with you starting early on in working with a lawyer, putting together your cost, pay or place, your agreements, your option agreements, the little things you do when you start off, but it also has to do with the lawyer that will lead you through the entire financial closing. And when you are doing financing with the bank, the financial closing is going to take likely at least 30 days. So that process is quite involved, and it's not something you can do on your own. Even I cannot do it on my own because it includes 150 different agreements, most of which I just look at and sign because they are bank driven templates. But someone needs to look at them, and it should be your lawyer. And when you hire this person, it's going to be someone that the bank will agree with, because this banking lawyer that leads you to the closing is likely someone that also deals with the bank. So the bank will kind of share that cost with you. Obviously, you pay the bank because you're paying it in fees, but they will be partially handling that part of the legal fees. Finance fees could be anything from, an executive producer, an equity investor who says, I want an executive producer fee. That's a finance-driven fee, or they want a little finance fee, or your incentive lender wants a finance fee on top of what they're charging you anyway. There's always some finance fees that are applied. You put them in here. Now, the contingency is basically just a reserve. This is not a line item associated to any of the above the line, below the line, or any of the specific line items at all. This is your bucket that you use when you go over some of the department's expenses that are allowed and allocated. The contingency that the completion bond company will ask you to have will likely be at the 10% level, somewhere around that. Your job is to get it down to 5% in negotiating with them. And you can negotiate with them and saying, where do you see issues? Why do you want me to put a 10% contingency in here? Can we eliminate that by maybe changing a few things in the script, or what do you want me to do? So have a conversation with the completion bond company to lower that, because when you go and get your production incentive, they will not look at that portion as a value of eligible expenses at this very moment, because they don't know how you're going to spend this, because you don't even know how you're going to spend it. So that means you're not going to get any incentives on that contingency, and you kind of want to optimize your incentives. So your job is to keep this number very low so that it can be part of your production incentive. And it also needs to be low so that the amount you have to finance will be lower, because if you have a high contingency, obviously your budget goes up and you have to raise more money. Now, when we talk about sales agent and distributors and how we get to work with them, we need to look at a few things in choosing the right person. So when you choose a sales agent, you would go and look at someone who does a similar genre to what you're doing. Look at their lineup. So when they go to the American Film Market or when they go to the Cannes Film Festival, they usually announce their projects early on. So you can go on the websites and you can see what kind of projects are they going out with? What are they working with right now? And those projects will give you an idea if your project fits well into this kind of lineup. And then you look at the budget level that they're dealing with. Are they selling low budget movies and you're trying to sell a movie that's $50 million? That's probably not the sales agent you want to work with. Are they selling $15 million movies and your movie is $2 million? It's not ideal either. So you want to look at the lineup that they have, because they will then also easier take your movie and, run with it. So you want them to be excited about the project that you give with them, and you want them to know how to sell the project that you give to them, because they have sold similar projects and were successful in doing so. The value that they will create for you, the sales estimates in that case, will always relate to your script and your talent. It will somewhat relate to the budget, but they really just look at the story and the package when you send them something. And they'll also ask you about your potential finance plan, and you can talk to them about the brilliant things you learn in this course. This is kind of how you want to go about it. It's perfectly fine to say, this is a preliminary finance plan I have in mind, and get their feedback on it. Maybe they say, you know what, I don't think I can sell 35% of this internationally, but I can sell 35% in the US. So there you go, there's something. So they will give you suggestions on how they hit a certain pre-sale number that you need. And that's a conversation you want to have with them early on. Now, when you do a deal with a sales agent, you want to make sure that the sales agent is not telling you, I want to be a distributor. The difference between a sales agency agreement and a distribution agreement is that with a distribution agreement, you give away rights. With the sales agency agreement, you only give away the right to sell on your behalf. You're not giving actual rights away. You're not giving actual distribution rights away. Here's the difference between a sales agent and a distributor. A distributor is someone who buys the rights for a movie, then takes the movie and puts it into the theaters in the territory they bought it for. Let's do an example. You sold the movie to a German buyer named Konstantin. Konstantin is a fairly big buyer in Germany, and they release movies theatrically. They sell the movies then for the television network that they work with. It could be RTL Television, could be Pro7, 2 German network stations, and then they go and do maybe a video on demand deal with a video on demand platform, let's say Sky, and then they go and maybe sell it to Netflix Germany. This distributor, Konstantin, takes a movie and runs it through all the release windows, from theatrical distribution to video on demand to DVD, if there still is such a thing, free TV, and platform. They literally distribute through all these channels. Now, your sales agent doesn't really do that, does he? He took the German, rights and basically said, hey, Konstantin, you can buy Germany for $1 million, and then you can distribute the movie. So they handled a negotiation, and they sold the German rights on your behalf to the distributor. And then the distributor, Konstantin, pays the down payment and gives you a contract, and that's the contract you take to the bank and get money for. The sales agent doesn't pay you money unless they give you a minimum guarantee. We'll talk about that later. But they don't really distribute the movie theatrically. They don't go into the whole distribution chain. They just take the rights and sell it to a distributor. That's why the sales agency agreement should be a sales agency agreement and not a distribution agreement. And the other thing you need to know, if you work with a sales agent who is not willing to take a collection agent as a entity where the distributors pay to, meaning when the Konstantin buys the rights for Germany, they make a payment, and that payment goes to the collection agency account. If you don't have a collection agent, that payment goes to the sales agent. It's already a problem. If the sales agent doesn't tell you he sold Germany to Konstantin, you won't know. If he doesn't tell you for how much he sold it to Konstantin, you don't know. Some sales agents are transparent, and they will give you a sales report after every market that says we actually sold it to Germany and we got this much money. So they'll be honest about it, and they'll tell you this is what we're going to get. But then it comes to the part of expenses. How do you know how much expenses they really have? You don't know, so they start deducting all kinds of things. And the worst thing is they take that money and you don't know what they're going to do with it. So let's say they took the money from Germany and maybe the sales agency uses it for something else where it's cash flow low. Oh my God, someone is doing fireworks out there. I apologize for that. So I think you have to think about the fact that when the sales agent gets the money, you become also responsible for what happens to that money. When the collection agent takes the money, your responsibility is little at ease, because you can tell your investor, honestly, the collection agent handles all the revenues and they handle all the expenses, and I don't even touch the money. I don't see anything until I get profits. If the sales agent handles the money, they will make reports to you, and then they pay you, and then you have to pay everyone else. It's a headache and accounting thing that you don't want to deal with. Now, what happens if that sales agent goes bankrupt? They took all the money from your distributors, and now they're bankrupt. That money is gone. That's a big problem for you. So why have these issues? You don't have to have these issues. You rather pay a collection agent 1%, they handle everything for you, and you're good. So in short, if the sales agent that you want to work with does not agree to a collection agent, you do not work with this sales agent, ever. You go to someone else, because a bankable, professional sales agent that is a sales agent of the level you want to work with, they will agree to a collection agent. And it's only the kind that do like weasy-neasy things sometimes. I'm not saying they all do, but whoever does not want to agree to a collection agent usually has a reason why they don't want to, and that reason is not a reason that goes in line with your incentive and your goal in making a profitable movie. Now, when we talk about what a distributor and buyer and the networks want, we obviously talk about what we said earlier, a strong idea, a strong package. And for television, it is important to know that cast and director are actually not as important for a TV show than for a movie. For a TV show, the showrunner is much more important. So that is where you put your money. You are going to look around, figuring out what showrunner would be ideal for my project. Now, there are different levels of showrunners. You can obviously go to the A-level showrunners. It's going to be a little harder to get them. But there are showrunners that are on the writing level, that are writing showrunners that may be not quite there yet, but have a lot of experience already doing a TV series and would be excited about your idea. So that's the kind of showrunner you want to approach, because they will be likely strong enough to give the network the confidence that they know what they're doing, because they have done a few network shows, maybe even with the network that you're talking to. And they're not going to be crazy expensive and hard to reach because they're already on the A-level and it's harder for you to get them. So look at a showrunner who has a solid scope, a solid body of work, and has experience. And that's the kind of person you want to contact. And you can do it through an agent, you can do it through their representation, you can do it through a lawyer, and you can obviously go direct if you have the option. Those are the things you need to think about. Now, when we talk about financing elements with distributors, you can think about things like, as an example, let's say Netflix really likes your project, and your finance plan, could include a sale to Netflix. And let's say Netflix says, you know what, we want all the domestic rights. We don't just want to buy a license, a US license for 3 years or 5 years. We want to own the US market forever, which, by the way, is not uncommon for someone like that to ask for. That is called a split rights deal, also similar to a co-production deal, because you split the rights up. You give them the US bucket and you keep the foreign bucket. So you split your cake in half, so to speak. They have the US, you have foreign. And the reason why you can do that and would do that is because they usually pay more money for that. So if they own the US rights forever, they will pay more money. Again, you will also look at the subsidy component here, because let's say you do a co-production deal with Germany. You go and shoot your movie in Germany. In order for you to get all the subsidies available to you in Germany, you're going to have to do a deal with the network in Germany. That's the only way to get the subsidies. So in this case, the German rights would go to Germany. They would pay for it, but those rights would no longer be available for you to sell. That's a co-production deal. So you basically say to Germany, you pre-buy my German rights because I'm getting all these subsidies, and then that territory is gone. And the other two finance elements you talked about is the equity investment and your loan. Now, how do you access all these people? How do you get to meet them? How do you meet sales agents? And I always say, it helps you to focus on the leading film markets. Well, right now, a lot of the leading film markets are actually online, so it's pretty easy to go online and figure out who is where, what do they want, and just contact them, because everything's happening online. This is one of the maybe positive things about COVID. If they wouldn't be online, you would go to the American film market here in Santa Monica, and you would roam around the film markets to network. I mean, networking is very important. You would also, which I always say, go to the conferences that the American film market do, which are great. They have a whole 4 days of various conferences with people on panels that are all high caliber people. So you get to know who is who and what they do on these panels. And you realize who the players are that you should be dealing with. And it's a great way to network. So you're not going to make the movie sitting at home like with me, online, and just hoping something happens. You're going to have to get your butt out there, and you're going to have to meet some people. Networking is very important in our industry. The other way you can work is you can go obviously to a talent agency and send them your fantastic project idea. And if it's really good, they might take it and they might represent it. And then they might help you in packaging it and getting it to a network, getting it to cast, and put it all together for you. So if you have a strong idea, there is definitely a path available to go through one of the talent agents, ICM, CAA, the Gersh agency, whoever feel most comfortable with. The other thing you can do is you can co-produce the project with someone who has done a few things. I always say to emerging or expanding industry professionals that want to go the producing route, it is helpful for you to combine forces with people that can elevate your project in some way. Maybe you find a producer who has a strong relationship with a certain cast member or a certain director that you like, or you just want to attach a co-producer with you because you really don't have enough experience and you want someone to help you put it together. So these co-production partners are essential for you to access who you need to access. When you do a movie in a country like Germany or France or Italy or any of the incentive-driven co-production treaty countries, you have to work with a co-producer that is local anyway. You're not going to get around that, because the only way for you to access these subsidies is via a local producer, which would be then a co-production partner. Right, I'm spending way too much time. So I think we're summing it up here. You know what you understand when you put something together, understand your marketplace. Now, I want to quickly talk about a limited market space. So let's say you live in France and you want to do a French movie. If your audience is limited to a territory, you make a French language movie in France, you obviously have local possibilities in financing your movie. So the balance there would be use the local subsidies, work with the local network stations to get it done. You will likely not have, you might have an equity investor depending on what it is, but it is a different kind of scenario because your market is very limited to that region. And that's okay. You can make also movies that travel the film festival market. You know, they are smaller movies and they make money through the film festivals. That's also okay. Just keep in mind when you do these things, the budgets have to be low. Because if you do a art house movie that's $10 million, you will lose money. Unless you put an A-level actor in it and it becomes an Academy Award contender, then you're fine. But short of that, you're going to lose money. So it is important to keep in mind that the target audience that you're doing the movie for or doing the TV show for is reflected in your budget. So level it out in making sure that whatever you produce and the target audience matches up with what the budget should be. Understand your budget versus sales estimates. The budget should be reflected in a way that 70 to 75% of it can be covered from international sales estimates or international sales when they come about. The risk mitigation that we're talking about earlier is that when you develop a script and you put the package together, that is the development phase where an equity investor is essential. And you want to be transparent to them in saying, here's my entire plan for this project. I'm going to put a business plan together that talks about the idea, that talks about the budget I have in mind, it talks about the director I may have attached already or I'm about to. It talks about the cast that I'm envisioning. I have some sales estimates here that I discussed with my sales agent. Here's my preliminary finance plan. Here's the marketing strategy that I have in mind. And here's the risk mitigation elements I'm going to apply by using non-recoupable finance sources. These are the things that you put in your business plan early on when you mitigate your investors' risks. And mitigation means you're using the pre-sales as a factor to figure out the demand or the acceptance in the marketplace for your project, and you're using non-recoupable finance sources to protect your investor. You're also using loans because they are cheaper than what your investor would charge you. In an example that I'll show you in a minute, you'll see why that is. Let's talk about the collection agent real quick. Collection agent is basically like an escrow company where they put a collection account together for you that handles everything. Everyone who is in your movie or TV project, and the actor, the guilds, if you shoot in the US, you will likely be subject to SAG, WGA, DGA. The guilds will be signing the collection agent management agreement. Your investors, your bank, the incentive lender, the completion bond company, anyone who touches your movie in a way that is either the sales agent, of course, that either has to do with we're getting money of some sort at some time, we're getting expenses paid, or we're getting repaid or investment, or we have revenues coming in. Anyone that touches the project in any financial manner, even deferments, will be in the CAMA agreement. So this agreement, the CAMA agreement, short for Collection Agent Management Agreement, combines all the pieces that are relevant for your project, and it's the heart of your project. And the beautiful thing is that is everything in one place. So for everyone involved, it's a transparent document that will tell them, here's what everyone gets, here's when everyone gets paid, here is when I get paid. And the collection agent will issue reports, a lot of reports in the beginning when all the sales are being made, and then quarterly reports to everyone to show them, here's where we are right now. We made $5 million on this $10 million movie. And then we made $7 million. So as money comes in, they issue reports. And then they show you, this is what the sales agent got. This is what the mezzanine lender got. This is what the bank got. This is what the equity investor gets. This is what maybe the post-production house gets. All the people that are getting money, when they're getting it, will be reflected in this report. So it's a very transparent thing, very unlike what the studios do, because they don't tell you and show you any of that. So this is something where you can really protect your investor in saying, investor, there's no creative accounting applicable with my project. Everything is transparent. Everything will be handled by a neutral third party that I have no influence over, and you will be part of this agreement. This is how you protect your investor, by making sure that they understand the entire process is absolutely transparent. Very important for you to remember this. And the other thing that's important for you to remember is that using a collection agent will reduce your liability. Not that you don't owe money to your investor, but it reduces your liability to the investor because you're not actually touching any money. The investor is being paid by the collection agent. So let's say money comes in, investor feels they should have gotten paid and they didn't get paid. Now they're angry. Well, they will call you first because you did the deal with them, and then you can say, well, I'm not actually paying you. It's the collection agent that's supposed to pay you, so call them, or you would call them. But the idea here is reducing your risk. You reduce your risk by putting the collection agent into the position of collecting all the monies and paying all the responsible expenses. And that's important for you to do. The ideal finance plan looks something like this. You're going to have estimates of somewhere in 70 to 75% from foreign. You're going to have pre-sales around 30 to 35%. The gap loan that you're going to get from the bank, which is the loan you get against your unsold rights, the rights you haven't sold yet, will never be more than 20% of your budget, no matter what your unsold rights are. So if you have a lot of unsold rights and could get more, the bank will never give you more than 20%. Just doesn't exist. A mezzanine loan is something that is kind of in between the senior loan and the equity. It's why it's called mezzanine. It's also referred to as a junior loan. You don't want to put more than 15% in there. And the reason is, if you have a gap loan of 20% and a mezzanine loan, you're pushing your equity investor down in the recoupment schedule, because everyone gets paid at a certain time. And the later you are in the recoupment schedule, the higher your risk. So when you look at a recoupment schedule, you see bank is usually paid first, then the mezzanine, then the equity. So if you push the equity down by having a larger mezzanine portion, that equity might never get paid. So you want to keep it at a level where you still have enough collateral available for your equity investor. Collateral means unsold rights that you can still sell that would cover the equity investment. Now, the equity investor can give you more money if they take over the mezzanine or the senior loan position, because that way they eliminate who is in front of them. So if they eliminate who is in front of them, the risk is basically the same. So they've taken over a position, they give you more money. Well, it's costing you more, of course, but it also saves you time by having to put together a bank loan. It's not a bad idea when an equity investor says to you, I want to pay you half the budget, or in this case, it could be even 55% of the budget. If you don't use the bank, it's not the worst deal to make. So if you have an offer like that, I would say consider it. Your tax incentives, your production incentives should never be less than 20% if you can help it. Most incentives are over that, so just more that you just make sure that you pick something that will be there. If you don't hit that number, if you're not shooting in a tax incentive region, you have a few other ways to covering this non-recoupable component by using crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, by using brand integration, which is basically brands paying you for using their product in an integrated way, meaning you use it in a storytelling way, not just, you know, putting a Coke bottle on screen and expecting Coke to pay you $1 million. Doesn't happen. You need to integrate it in your script. It's a process where you work with the brand together to reflect their message in a way they want to see it reflected. So that integration money you don't have to pay back. In-kind services and in-kind support also is something that is interesting for you. Could be a few things. Let's start with the post-production house. There are many, many, many post-production houses. And what they like doing is attaching projects early on to them. So they want to make sure that they get your project the minute you're talking about it. So what they will do, they often offer you to defer 50% of the post-production budget to be paid from the revenues. This will reduce your budget. It will reduce the need to raise money, and it's something you should consider. Now, when they do that, they will likely ask you for a small little premium to be paid on the portion that they're deferring because they're taking a little risk, and it's sometimes around 10%. I feel it's worth giving that little premium because it reduces your headache. Whenever you can reduce cost, you want to do it early on. A music investment is something that is not recoupable for you because the music investor gives you money and keeps the music royalty rights and revenues. So when you create an original score or when you create a song for your movie, those are worth money because the network stations and studios that release your movie all over the world, they pay for this. These are called music royalties. And the music investor will actually go ahead and say, I will give you upfront money and I will take these music royalty rights and I will recoup from them. So there's a lot of companies who do that, and you're going to see them on Canvas because I'm sharing them with you. And that's something for you to consider as well. So I'd like to run you through a little example of what it would look like if you use an equity investor to pay your whole movie, and if you don't use an equity investor to pay the same movie, what the revenues would look like. Let's assume we have a movie that's $5 million. Let's assume that we are thinking the movie is going to be making 35% from the US and 75% from the international. So a movie is going to make $5.5 million, okay? So hold on a second, I need to move this a little over here. Sorry about that. So now you see none of the other finance elements are here applicable. It's all zero because you have one equity investor giving you $5 million. On the face of it, this sounds great, but here's what happens in the recoupment phase. Now you have to take your revenues, $5.5 million, that's great, but now you have to pay some people. You have to pay your collection agent 1%. Now let's say you don't pay the collection agent because you just have an equity investor and he doesn't care. That's okay. But you still have to pay your sales agent because someone has to sell the rights to your movie. You're not just going to do that yourself. And here it is, $880,000. The equity is going to get paid. The equity doesn't even get paid its equity because you're not making enough money. So what that does, if you do this scenario, you will end up with a loss because you're going to have to pay some people. You're going to go with, okay, I'm going to make 75% likely out of foreign. I'm hoping to make 35% from domestic. Maybe you make a little more, but you don't know that. So in this scenario, we're actually losing money by taking our equity investor to pay for the entire movie. And if we split the cake up by using different finance sources, let's say we use the same movie, but we're using pre-sales, we're using a bank loan, we're using some tax incentives, and we're reducing the equity to what we actually need after we included all these finance elements and sliced it up, it looks like this. So now we have same movie, same revenues, but we're doing some pre-sales of 35%. So we're getting $1,750,000 from pre-sales. We have some down payments on the pre-sales that we can use to finance the movie. So we have a bank loan here that we can use. Altogether, a bank loan is $2.4 million. We have some tax incentives of 20%. I think I said 25% in there. Anyway, it says 20 here. Never mind. Same thing. So you're slicing up these elements by taking the equity and using other financing elements instead of it. So you do what you're learning in this class. And here's what's going to happen when you do that. The same movie is going to look like this. Same movie, same return, same everything. You just sliced up the finance sources by using other finance sources and taking less from your equity. You're now looking at a net revenue of $374,000, where you before had a loss of $434,000. So it's not always ideal to take 100% equity because, as you see here, it helps you and the equity investor to take that down. I'd like to walk you through the last case study, which is the case study you are free to do if you want to. So this is one of the extra credit case studies. If you want to do it, you can basically just take this recording later on and apply it on your own and run with it a little bit. I want to take you through this, and this is the last thing we're going to do before I put Wendy on, because it includes some of the realistic elements you're going to find in the marketplace, because you're going to find that the bank will obviously charge you interest. You're going to find that the incentive lender obviously wants to get paid for doing the cash flowing. So we're going more into the fact that also you're going to have to pay some profit participation to CAST and to the equity. So we're including some of the real life things that are going to happen when you put a movie together. So we're going to dive into it a little deeper, and I want to walk you through it so that when you do this assignment on your own, if you choose to do it, you can kind of test it out and see if your understanding makes sense for you. So this movie is going to be $18 million. The sales fee is going to be 16% of the revenues, same as we had before. In this case, however, the distribution rights for the US, which are not sold by the sales agent, are actually sold by a talent agency. And that's often the case. Your international sales agent will likely only sell international rights. There are some sales agents who have good relationships with domestic partners, and then they will do the domestic sale. But in that case, they should charge you less for that. So you should negotiate with your sales agent if they charge the US to drop the fee down to somewhere around 5 to 10%, while they keep the fee for international higher. If you go with a talent agency, CAA, ICM, the Gersh agency, you name it, UTA, they will charge you anywhere from 5%, what I have seen, 5 to 10%, what I've seen in doing this for you. And they're usually the people that do it for you. We're going to have profit participation applicable. We're going to pay our CAST 40%. We pay something to the equity. We'll figure out what that is in a minute. We do have the same distribution revenues applicable as you see in the case study. This case study, by the way, is going to be in your module as an example. So there is an example that will walk you through it. Even if you don't want to watch this recording again, there is going to be a case study available for you that talks about exactly this scenario. So we're going to have 75% again estimated pre-sales. We're going to have 35%. We're going to now get a down payment from our distributors who pre-bought our movie, and we're going to keep that money and we're going to put it in our finance plan. We're going to have a senior loan, and they're going to charge interest 5% on the pre-sale loan because the pre-sale loan has contracts. The risk is lower for the bank, so they're going to charge a lower interest. For the gap loan, there is no contract. It's not an asset-backed loan. So there they're going to likely charge you a higher percent interest. So we're going to play with that here as well. Our incentive is 25%, and the incentive lender is going to charge us a 15% fee. And the equity that we're going to get is going to pay the balance to cover the production cost. They will charge us a 20% premium, and they will charge us 50%. In the back end for equity is this. It's 50% of the percentage they gave you in relation to the budget. So let's say you have an equity investor giving you 50% of the budget. Their profit participation would be 25%. They would give you 50% of the budget. They make a 20% premium and a 25% profit participation in the IP forever. So anything you do with the IP, they participate. If you do a sequel, they get 25%. If you do a spin-off, they get 25%. The equity investor is your partner in the IP forever. Just know that. That's also a reason why you don't want to have the equity investment be so big, because you're sharing for the life of the IP, right? In many cases. Maybe you negotiate it differently, but in many cases this will apply. So in our case, we're going to figure out how much our profit participation is when we go into the finance plan. Just keep in mind, if an equity investor gives you 100% of the budget, he owns 50% of the profit forever. If he gives you 50% of the budget, he owns 25% of profits and ownership in the IP. If he gives you 25% of the budget, he owns 12.5% ownership and profit participation. That's kind of the math. So let's look at our thing here. The finance plan, first we have to put together valuation. We're looking at our $18 million budget, which comes down to $13,500,000 for the international sales, and our pre-sales are going to be $6,300,000. The US, we're going to sell afterwards, so it's not going to be part of the actual finance plan, but we're going to assume to sell it afterwards at $5 million. So our bucket for revenues are going to be somewhere around $24,800. So how does this play out in our loan? Here's the loan. We're going to get all the pre-sales funded, which by the way, in reality is not the case. And we're going to dive into structures where you see that the bank will discount your contract subject to the distributor who is buying. If a distributor is buying from an economically challenged country, they will likely discount the contract by 50% or more. If it's a distributor that they know has a spotty payment history, and the banks know all the distributors because they deal with most of the movies, so they know who's paying what. And if there is a distributor that has a spotty payment history, they will also discount that contract. So we're assuming here discounting is not applicable, just to ease you into the finance plan a little bit. So we're just staying with 100% is pre-sold. We got 20% already from these people, so we're gonna have to deduct this here. So our gross pre-sale loan amount is $5,040,000 after we deducted the down payment that we already got. We're paying 5% interest, so what we're getting when we're closing our movie with all the finance pieces together is $4,788,000 for the pre-sale loan. For the gap loan, we're looking at our unsold rights. Unsold looks like it's $7.2 million. Of that, the bank will only accept collateral in the value of 50%, so that's $3.6 million. It charges 9% interest, and the rest goes to us. So the net bank loan that we're going to have available to cover our $18 million is $8,064,000. You need to keep the gross bank loan in mind, though, because that's the number you have to repay. Why is that? Because the interest here, 5% interest here, 9% interest here, you didn't actually give the bank a check to pay that interest, did you? No one gave the bank any money. So this is the recoupment component that applies when they're making their interest. So when you pay the bank back, you pay them the gross loan amount that includes the interest that you would be paying. So let's look at the incentive. Very easy. We have 25% that we're getting, 25% of 18 million, and the incentive lender will charge a 15% fee, which leaves us with 3,825,000 for the incentive. So if we have to figure out what our equity is, we're going to take the bank loan, we're going to take our incentive, and we figure out how much money we have and how much is left to cover our $18 million. In this case, it's $4,851,000, which is about 96.95% of our budget. We need to keep that number in mind because half of that number is going to be the profit participation later that we're paying to our investors. So here we're going into revenues first. We put together all the money that we're getting. We're getting US, we're getting international. We're obviously deducting the money that we already got, which is the down payment, and we're left with $17,240,000 that will hit our collection account once we made the movie, once all the rights are being sold. So this is what that looks like. We have to now pay expenses. We have to pay our collection agent. We have to pay our international sales agent. We have to pay our US agency. We pay our bank gross loan. We pay our equity. And now we're paying the equity premium, of course, as well. So our total expenses will be $17,043,600, and our total revenue was $17,240,000, which leaves us with $196,400 to be available to us as the net revenues that we now can pay profits out of. And here's how that looks like. We're dividing the profits up into the shares. We have to give our cost and director 40%, and that's 40% of the net profits. And the equity investor gets around about 13% because it was 26 and some change in profit. So this is what is left for you. 91,375 is what you as the producer, if you would be the producer, would go home with in the end. So that concludes our case study. Quickly, I want to talk about the group project before I hand it over to Wendy. I put together as an extra credit a little group project. The group members were randomly assigned by Canvas. So a group of 5 to 6 people in each group is going to be applicable to you. So you're going to have to look what group you are in. And then you also have to figure out, are you a group leader or not? The group leader is also randomly assigned. So I have no idea who is who. But I will be communicating with the group leader and talk about the project that the group will invent. And what you do is you invent a project that you're going to build together a business plan for, because I'd like you to have a practical application on how you put together your business plan as you go through the modules. So this group project goes through the entire 10 weeks of your course. And whenever you learn something new, you meet with each other. You're like, okay, let's add this component, let's add that component, and just build your business plan together. So just do your meetings online, however it is workable for you, and figure out what project you want to do and what elements you want to put together, and use the elements that you're learning in this class to then put together your group project. It's a very good practical application that gets you ready to put your own project together in a way that it can get greenlit. So now, Wendy, I'm going to actually stop sharing here. You guys, I should be stopped, right? Is it stopped? Can you guys, you don't no longer see the screen, right? Because I don't see anything.
No, we don't.
Okay, perfect. So is Wendy there?
I am.
Oh,
Hello,
there's
everyone.
Wendy. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
So
Hello.
first, I want to say I'm Wendy's biggest fan.
Oh, thank you.
Because she is amazing when it comes to picking projects, and we're actually working on some things together.
Yeah.
She has an amazing taste. We met at this panel for it was, I think, Digital Hollywood. We were on a panel where it had to do with women's film, this and the other, and we instantly connected. And since then, I have been working on a few things together. Now, what I like about Wendy is that she has a very versatile background. She is not from this country, so she started from scratch, coming from Australia. She worked in all the different content areas, television and film, documentary, everything. She worked for the big guys, the studios, and she has her own production entity and puts together all the various things. So Brandy, Brandy, I need more coffee. I'd like to ask you, if it's okay with you, would you mind sharing with us how you started your career? How did it all begin for you?
Wow, that's a really big question. Before I start, I just wanted to just say hello to everyone and just let them know, God, I wish I took this class when I was at university or starting off, because it would have saved me so much time and heartache. You guys are really lucky to have Jeanette, who has been through everything. And because we've probably been screwed over, made so many mistakes and actually done things on the way, that's how, you know, you have this beautiful document that shows you and navigates probably years that you're going to save and anguish you're going to save just from doing this class. So, you know, it is really valuable. And I was like, man, that could have saved me so much time if I knew that years ago. So thank you. It was really impressive. So I have been a producer for 30 years. I'm also a writer. I started off in my first job while I was still actually at university was in television. And I started off in the marketing and publicity of television, which made me actually realize you need an angle and you need a hook very quickly. And it's not too dissimilar for when you're reading a script. And then I built myself up and went on the production side, became a producer, ended up having within 3 years the #1 television show in Australia that sold internationally. I realized the value of a format and of a franchise on how you may not make money on your first film, but if you can sell the format 120 times, which is what we ended up doing when I worked for a company called Mark Burnett Productions, where they sold a show called Survivor into many different countries, and it's still going now, that you actually just take royalties once you've actually come up with that. So it made me think more of the business side of when you're actually producing. From there, it was a very small television market. So I went to London. I ended up working for the BBC and started producing there in the comedy unit. And then I worked for a company, Rupert Murdoch's Live TV, where I did documentaries and special features and ran that for him for many years until they paid me a little bit of money to, they were going to close down, and there was a big bombing in Canary Wharf, which was very interesting at the time because we were live to air. And it was, when you work for a live television station, there's nothing that you can't do. It just has to be ready. And you just have to put on whatever you can put on. Then I went to New York, and I thought this is the best place in the world. And I thought I really want to write. And the reason I thought I wanted to write was that I was dyslexic, and I could never thought I actually could ever write. And then computers spell checked everything for me. And I had a bunch of different stories, but I was always doing coverage on film. And I realized that from working for different production companies, I could make $50 a script if I did coverage. So I worked out if I could do 5 scripts a week, I could pay my rent at doing 25 scripts a week. And there I learned that there are some very bad scripts out there, and every script is derivative of every other script. And I thought, you know what, I can do this. This is what I wanted to do. So I stopped and I wrote for 5 years while I was doing marketing. And I realized how hard it was to write. And the first script was terrible. The second script was okay. And the third one I sold to Miramax, which we all know is not existing anymore. Thank goodness for that. But what it allowed me to do was, as a producer, and I encourage all of you to do this if you want to be a really great producer, is write. And even Jeanette has written her own scripts. And what that makes you do is, when you work with different writers, it really makes you understand the process, makes you a better producer. And you don't want to obviously produce a bad film. It makes you help you improve the script that you're working on, and you can identify it very quickly. And so I was flown out here to LA, and I worked on to keep while I was writing, I was doing some unscripted work, and I produced a show called The Apprentice. And it was interesting that we probably media trained the current president, which was probably not my best quality and remembrance of that experience. But they did give me to LA, and here in LA, I ended up working in a development and changed into an executive. And it let me really see this side of what it's like to work for a big studio, and what you look at, and the deals that you look at, and how to package. And I helped set up a scripted department there. I worked with Mark Burnett, I worked with Hearst, and I worked with MGM. And with MGM, it was a beautiful experience, because I got to run pretty much the whole thing, and identified things, packaged it together, fixed it, worked it with different top, I would say, agents, managers, and as well as directors and writers directly. And it's a beautiful thing when you can work with really great talented people and there's no ego involved. But unfortunately, there is a lot of ego involved with a lot of these things. And so what you're really doing in that case is really just navigating, all right, can we work with this person? Can we trust this person? Who's going to have the creative control in the end? Is there what sort of collaboration it is? And creative control is a very arbitrary thing, because the producer has it until you give it to a director. And in that stage, you still have to oversee it, but you still also have to let go of this and make sure they have the same vision. So even if they've got a big name, I have turned down big directors because their vision was completely different to what the script needed to be. And so after a while and a few years of that, I did actually jump on the digital train, and I actually created a women's channel, because I felt that was very underrated. I raised money, so I know what it's like to deal with finances and investors. And then 3 years ago, it took a big dive. And so I went back into what I knew, and I decided, you know what, if I got a choice to do what I wanted to do, what would it be? And I made some sacrifices, and I spoke to my husband, and I have a family, and I decided this is what I wanted to do. And I have to tell you, once you get on your track in your field and you're on the right thing, big things kept coming in. And I now get to select the projects and the people that I worked with. And I'm so excited about every single project. And all I can tell you is, if you don't think that your project is better than anyone else's in this classroom right now, then go get another project, because everyone needs to think that your project is the best, because it's going to take that for you to get it up.
Right. What are the, when you choose a project, Wendy, what are some of the things you look at? What makes it special for you?
And thank you for saying that. There are very great projects out there that go to film and studios directly. What I try and do, first of all, I specialize in stories of impact that usually are true stories or that have a special meaning or connection. I have 2 big companies. One is that deals with very big television and TV series, and the other one that deals with family, faith, and inspiration. And so they're both 2 loves of mine. And so I try to separate them a little bit, because you can't put action film on a true story in with an inspirational female sort of family driven movie. So when I look for this, I look at 2 things. what is the IP behind it? And it is easier, I will tell you right now, if you're writing your first script and it's an original script, unless you've won the blacklist, it's going to be very hard for you to get up that first script unless you're an experienced writer-producer. What I would highly recommend is try and find something that is based on some sort of IP, which you mentioned, and it could be a news article. It could be a life rights. It could be a book rights. So for example, I have something right now.
Hold on, let me just mute whoever is there. Okay, go ahead.
I have something right now that is based on the life rights of a true life story. But when this script had been around for 5 years and had been shopped around, and normally no one would touch it. And the producers that signed it up were very green. And when I'd read the script, I said, you know what, there's a beautiful message in here, but you've got a first-time writer and the way you're telling it is all wrong. And so what I can do is I can take an idea, recognize a good idea, look at the script saying, you know what, the script's probably not where it needs to be because it won't get a look in from the industry, revamp it, redo it, elevate it to the level that Hollywood needs. And then I'll go in and repitch it. And we've just done this and we've just raised a bunch of money for it. And now we're looking, now we're open for offers for directors. So it needs to have a special something of impact that really touches me emotionally.
Okay, so your advice and guidance that you would give to emerging and expanding industry professionals,
correct,
is sum that up.
Yeah, there's a lot of great ideas out there. They're just not told in a certain way. And there's a lot of same stories out there. And I'll give you an example just maybe of the unscripted world of when we pitched a music show. There were 3 other music shows on there. There was, X Factor, there was American Idol, but The Voice sold and became the #1 show because it was the same music show, but it had a spinning chair. So I always say to people, what is your spinning chair that makes yours a little bit different than everyone else, that makes it stand out? Because you can be in the same and live in the same genre. It is all about what makes it stand out and make it different. And that's what I try and pull out. That's
amazing. So I would like you guys, because Wendy covered all the questions that I wanted to ask her already in 2 answers. It's amazing. You're so efficient.
Sorry.
Guys, this is, do you have questions for Wendy? I'd like you to ask, I give it up to her first, and then later you can ask me questions about the presentation that we went through. Any questions for Wendy?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. Hi.
Hi, Sebastian.
How you doing? So in this kind of development that you're staging, right? As you say, like, okay, a script or a TV show, maybe an idea. And you were talking before, Jeanette, about also the showrunners, right? And so how do you, I don't know, advance maybe an idea or a script that you have into a showrunner that might get involved in? Where does the creation part of the project and the development part of the project, right? How do you get them on board and maybe not just kind of give away almost at like the IPs and project and the creation of the idea in itself, in a way?
It's a really good question. I'm in the middle of doing that for 3 projects right now. And I can tell you it's different for every single project has a different, let's say it finds its own path. I'm working with Bell Media in Canada, who actually, their streamer is bigger than Amazon, but they want a domestic sale and they want this to be more of a global series. And so I work with them to secure a showrunner. So with that, we identified which showrunner would be best for tax credits as well as for the actual genre of the series. And for that one, I had some money because it was backed by an English group, which was a big advertising group, that were ready to put in some offer money. If you've got offer money, there's a whole different conversation when you actually cold call or call an agent. When you say, hey, I have 150,000 that I want one of your clients to revamp a script and attach as a showrunner, and this is based obviously on a creative call, who have you got in this genre that you want to put forward? And so I go to a bunch of agents or managers and they'll put forward who they want. And then we will, the offer letter won't happen until we choose maybe one or two, have a conversation, see if we like their vision, and if we do, then we go ahead with it. Now, you can do it two ways. You can go in and find your showrunner on a relationship yourself and make them a partner and say, if you do this, you will have, a nice piece of the back end and you'll be my partner. The danger in doing that is if you just look at a lot of television shows, the showrunner is the first one usually that is usually sacked and left, because it is very rare that the showrunner from the original series sometimes actually stays with the show unless they created it themselves. Like Shonda Rhimes will actually, create it. But as a studio executive, I've actually had to not only, go in and fire a showrunner, but I've had to replace them until I find another one. So it's good for you to know both roles that you can do. So I also go to a packaging agent and I'll say, you know what, can you go out and do this job for me? And you'll take the packaging fee. Actually, I'll give you an example with Brillstein. I'm actually bringing them in and probably giving them a little bit of back end, because if they bring a showrunner that actually has a first look deal, and most of the top showrunners already are all locked up by the streamers, some by the networks, and you walk in and you like them, they walk you in with you to get that sale. And that's what's important, and that's the value, and that's worth it for me, because it's a guarantee that this will actually probably get made and be seen, especially with their first look deal.
That's great.
I have a question as well. Hi, Wendy. My name is Dan. Thanks for the helpful feedback. My question's around, how do you ensure you have that steady flow of projects that you can review? Is it more so your relationship with your talent agent, or do you seek out articles or read articles and then contact potential writers and seek out yourself? Is it more a push, pull, or combination?
Right now I'm at capacity and I've got people throwing things at me, so it's very hard for me to all I can say is I'm not quite sure how it came to me, but a lot of these things people find out about me. But there's things that I'm very passionate about as well. So maybe I've read a book that I really love, or a news article that someone sends. And then I have a bunch of writers that'll probably write on spec. If I don't, and so I write things myself, but I have a bunch of writers that I think are really talented, have a really good voice, but they need direction. So I'll write it with them and they'll do the bunch of the work, and then I'll rewrite it. And then we work together. So that gives them a break, brings them up, and to do that. I also work a little bit differently than most producers, and that's why I think Jeanette and I speak the same language. My playground is not just America. I work on the global level, because a lot of the things here are very hard. If everyone says no, we're stuck. So how do I revamp this to play on an international level and do a pre-sale first and then bring it back to America? And so because I work globally, I work with writers, mainly writers, that have great ideas that live in Canada or live in the UK or live in Australia. And so I'm getting things from everywhere, plus here. And it's just random. You have to, and I'm sure, I'm really sure Jeanette's brought this up, but I have a submission process where when someone sends me something, everyone says, listen, you can't submit it to me unless you have an agent. I'm not sure about that. But what I do is at least say, listen, here's a submission agreement. If I have something similar, you can't sue me. And that's really important for you to do as a producer, because you may have something very similar and someone says, well, I sent you my things. I want 50% of this movie you've just made because I submitted it to you. So you have to have proper channels and submission agreements to do that. All I would say to you is when you start reading scripts, even if it's a bad script, but the idea is good, but you have the way to change it, don't lose out on it, because they're the nuggets sometimes that Hollywood looks over, but you can actually take to that next level. Ideas are everywhere. And really good ones, you'll get better at it. But if you at least tick a few of the boxes that Jeanette have said, that's the first one. But also linking up with someone with a little bit more experience on your first one is a very smart thing to do.
Great point. Anyone else have any questions?
I have a quick question. Hi, thanks Wendy for taking time to talk with us. I just had a question regarding your work on The Apprentice. I've heard just through Netflix and other sources that was a very difficult show to work on. And I was wondering, did you pitch that show? And if you have any anecdotes to share from your time producing that show.
And nice to meet you, Jessica. Yes, you know, I am under a $5 million non-disclosure still, you can imagine. So there are certain things that I can't, don't worry, with Oprah, I have a $10 million non-disclosure when I produce her ABC show. But I was not involved with selling that show. I can tell you the fun story and how it came about. You know, I produced the last 2 seasons. So I was actually an everyday showrunner producer on that show until I changed to be a development executive, where I became more of a sales producer. What happened is that Mark had tried to sell this show quite a few times and everyone had said no to him. And so he knew that he needed a partner. At that time in New York, he flew in and he had an appointment with Mr. Trump, and he kept him waiting for maybe 3-4 hours in the lobby. And when he came out from a board meeting and Mark was like, Mr. Trump, and he told him who he was, and he goes, what do you mean you've been waiting out here for this amount of time? Who made you wait out there? And he looked at the secretary. He goes, you made Mark Burnett wait out here for 4 hours? And she just looked at him and he goes, you're fired. And he was like, that's it. That's going to be the catchphrase for the show. And so once you actually have the talent, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but you know, we were 50-50 partners on that deal. It's probably we never do that anymore, but it really launched, you know, that show and who it was. We also created the brand integration model. So on season 3, I can't tell you the numbers, but we made more money than the network because, you know, if you can imagine that 75% of that time was on a project, which we charged advertising dollars. They got pretty savvy to it. They locked it down. Networks now have their own brand integration show, and that cannot be done anymore. And you'll find that a network will actually give you, it's the only industry that when your show's doing well, they don't give you more money. They say, I want the same show, but you're going to have to do it for 25% less. And that's happened to me so many times. And that's when you have to go and get it from brand integration and in kind and beg, borrow and steal. So we do a lot of those with brands and P&G and Walmart just to try and pull up those dollars, you know, to do that. And that is a different way on how to sell something in and non-recoupable, as Jeanette was saying.
Fascinating. I didn't know. I'm learning so much about you. I'm glad you put you on it. Anyone else have any questions for Wendy? Oh, we got them all. Great. Anyone else have any questions for me?
I have one more thing I might want to add.
Oh, please.
Is just, you know, it's really important to keep up with the trends of the industry. Yeah. And I can give you an example. That's something that's really important. So a buddy of mine is like the head of acquisitions for Amazon. And I was like, what are you looking for? Because I'm always trying to find out, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? And so he's like, you know, we really need another action series like Jack Ryan. And I was like, great. So I have one of my partners he's the ex-CIA operations guy for the CIA and was a Marine. And he's got all these crazy stories that are making very good material. And so I made him a partner on anything that we come up with, and we get his stuff written. So that's another way, you know, Tam, to come up with stuff, find out someone who's had the live experience and pull out those stories and create it yourself. And one of the things he gave me was an amazing film. And I thought, this is great, but I really miss these characters once they're dead. So can we keep them alive and make it as a series? So I spent 6 months going in with him and the writer. We ripped apart. We actually made a new series. We made a whole Bible. I just finished the sizzle reel, and I contacted him again. And I was like, I've got your series. And he goes, what do you mean you've got your series? He goes, I need big budget movies that are 5 to 70 million now. And because everyone's, you know, not going to the theater anymore. And now we're after big action movies. And I was like, so, you know, you start across one path and you can keep pandering to these people, but their agenda is going to change. So what you have to do is have all this stuff ready, keep working on stuff. So when they say, you've got it, you've got to send it straight away. And it was a good lesson you know, for me to actually develop it, because there will be another buyer for it. But try not to be aware of the dream, but just make really good stuff, because it'll come. And one of the other things I can tell you about working in COVID, I think, which we didn't
yeah, good one. Thanks for mentioning that. COVID.
Yeah. So I had it in my notes because you told me that you might bring that up.
Yes.
You know, I have had one production of mine stop in the middle of COVID. I've had a series, which I've been negotiating for 1.5 years with a studio, just cancel, which is heartbreaking because you think that you're there and then you're not. And then I've had another great documentary, which Jeanette knows about, which is about a woman conductress who's the only woman conductress in the world that got fired for being pregnant. And she took them to court, and now you cannot do that for any musician, whether they're pregnant or not in there. And it's a really inspiring, you know, documentary. And the filmmaker is fantastic. It is definitely a passion project, but I just thought this was a really important project to get up. It wasn't a monetary decision for me. It was just something important. And so we went, and the woman is Irish. So we went to RTE, which is the network, and we said, we have this. And they said, we love her, let's do it. The commissioning editor loved it. We thought we had it. We brought in a co-pro because I needed the tax credits of a Irish production company. And the head of the commission, who, not saying I'm sexist or anything, but he's a guy, he's like, yeah, no, we don't need this. And so it went dead and there was nowhere to take it. But yet we had this beautiful story. So we thought, how can we rework this? She also wrote the score for a lot of video games. And so we changed the angle on how to actually, how classical music is seeping into a new age through video games. And we revamped it that way to make it a little bit more relevant, and we recut it. We did more interviews. And then in the middle of it, COVID hit, but we shot quite a bit of it. And we all thought we were stuck. But just before COVID hit, something happened. She was invited to be the first ever conductress to conduct the Oscars. It went on headlines everywhere. It went huge. And then suddenly we were like, hey, have you still got that documentary about, and in Europe, Arte, which is Germany, France, Salzburg, which is a big network there, they cannot shoot anything because you cannot shoot anything with big symphonies right now because of COVID. And they said, we want this because we need product, and yours is ready 90%, and all we need to do is interviews now. So they're now coming in with the funding and finishing funds to do that. So in that respect, COVID actually helped this project get up. So I've had things die because of the project. And now if you've got something shot, man, do they need content right now? They've got blank spaces that they're repeating. So
that's amazing. Kendra, I'm seeing your hand is up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I would like to. Thank you. Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much for speaking with us today and sharing your journey. For my husband wrote a script and I edited it. In the past year, I've kind of learned to be a producer through some UCLA extension courses. We were, through his networking mainly, his great connections he's made, he was able to get a crew and we got a cast. The only person of note who of our cast is Raymond J. Barry. And so our movie is Filthy Animals, Logline, day in the life of two misfits who surf, smoke, and hunt sexual predators. And Raymond Barry read our script and he liked it so much he wanted to be the main sexual predator. So we were very excited about that. We were able to finish 25 out of 26 shooting days before COVID shut everything down. So we just have one more day and some pickups probably. Right now we are, our assistant editor is syncing video and sound. We are able, through my husband again, made a great connection with Lawrence Jordan, who's an editor, who's done a lot of Wayans Brothers movies and other stuff, and he's willing to work with us and give us an amazing deal. So at this point, we personally have financed it up to this point, and we're thinking we probably do need some finishing funds. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice for us at this point, what we should do.
So I think there's a few different routes, and I think Jeanette can also, help you with that. Obviously, there's always there's a lot of incentives for free money right there for finishing funds that they give to first-time filmmakers as well and producers that you can get. Takes a little while to get. But I think if you've got that amount done, which is what I had on mine, you know, I would absolutely cut a trailer really quickly. I would put together, you know, your finance plan, and I would go in with a pre-sale and an acquisition, you know, to a streamer. And, you know, they would give you, you know, at least, you know, they will probably want to take a rights deal rather than a license deal, but maybe if they'll take, Amazon are a little bit more negotiable in carving out than Netflix. You can also do a rev share up on Amazon as well. But I would try and pre-sell that as it is, and then they would probably give it to you, especially if you've got cast, if you've got more than 99, which you have, obviously 99% shot, and then, you know, try and find that. Otherwise, if there's any way you can cobble it together and make it yourself and finish it and then take it to a market, you'll probably get a lot more money for it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
I wanted to ask again, if you guys don't mind. So in a way, like a two-part question. So right now we have a show that we just premiere on Amazon, and then right now we just optioned another one with Sony. And my question was, and we're going through a different show now that's also about to sell, but the question was, you know, at what point do you decide to either use kind of, for us in the first project, we went through Sony, right? Because they were a bigger monster and the way we could negotiate with these streamers was way better, right?
Yep.
But now I have those connections directly. So the question is, should I still, you know, kind of use Sony as an engine to get to the bigger markets in a sense, or should I just start going straight to the streamers and try to pitch more of the other shows in a sense? Because in the past with Sony, we got an amazing deal with them. We actually were able to keep all of our IP, and at the end of the day, a lot of the problems that with the branding as well, you know, Amazon has this crazy deals where you cannot put anything. And then since Sony was such a big monster, we got all of our branding back. So I don't know, but of course you're giving part of your IP or your distribution when you're going to Sony or things like that, if they're doing some gap finance. So I guess the question is, if you have the direct contact, should we try to start going to those streamers and those things, or should we still team up, since especially we're a small company in a way and we create and produce pretty much ourselves?
It's a really, really good question. So first of all, I'll ask you, is it a TV series that you've sold, or is it a movie, and has it aired yet?
No, it's a series.
Okay. Has it aired yet?
The first one, it did. So the first one just aired last week. Just came out.
What is it? Do I?
It's called How to Survive Being Single, and it's Amazon Prime original, 10 episodes, half an hour comedy.
Did they give you some feedback?
Not yet. I mean, the
analytics. Yeah.
No, they won't share any of the analytics, and especially because we had to do kind of like the bureaucracy method of we talk to Sony, Sony talks to them. The only feedback we got from the first show was like, it did better than we expected, but nothing more than that.
And they didn't give anything to Sony either. Any feedback? Do you know?
Nothing whatsoever.
Yeah, they are very closed with that sort of stuff. So a couple of things. There is, the streamers love to have preferred production companies that they like to go with, because they have so much going on that they want someone with a track record that is going to deliver on time, on budget, and make sure they don't lose their money. Full stop. So sometimes I will, you know, go straight to an Amazon, or I'll go straight to a streamer. I'll say to you, now that you've got your first one up, and that there is some success there, you do not need to go with Sony. You probably obviously need to go with them because of that particular project, but they've negotiated a template, and a template is really sets the precedent of your future deals. And it's very hard when you go and you take a bad deal, they look at you that way. So I think you did very well going in with the studio and setting the template of the expectation of what you got. Because in the end, you made it, I'm sure. The showrunner made it. It was Sony just oversaw the deal and did the negotiation. Great, that is worth a lot of value. With your second one, if you go in, make sure that you go in with this almost fully packaged. They are very lazy because there's too much to do. So if you go in with your, definitely what I've been told with, it's different for Netflix and different for Amazon. For Netflix, they would love you to probably come in with a known showrunner, someone that is bankable, that they can know that will deliver it. Don't need a studio if you've already got something up with Amazon. That's your track record to say we've got this. They said don't put a star unless that star, you don't think that star could be replaced. If you think that that person is the only person that can play that role and can knock it out of the park and they're a big name, go for it. Like, for example, Wahlberg, easy, you know, it's an easy sign off. Are they bankable? Just as you're putting something together for an investor. Amazon are a little different. If you go in with it all packaged and ready to go and they like it, you know, and you've even got a pre-sale, that's great. My method is a little bit different. I find that sometimes when you go out and you get interest from an international buyer first, or it's a quicker sale. They start to take attention to it a little bit more because someone's really done the due diligence and kicked the tires on this and said, you know what, this is great and this is sellable. So it makes it a little bit more attractive rather than you being in a begging position where you're pitching and saying, hey, look at my project, it's great. So you've got to really stand out to say, this is a really hot property. I've already got so-and-so interested. Here's your time frame. Can you please come back to me really quickly? And that is sort of, that's a little bit more sales strategy, what we're talking about now, in what you're trying to do. But I would say on the heels of a hit, you probably don't need to go to a studio now that you've got it, and you've got to, but get a strong package together before you go in. If they start bullying you again, you can always attach. Sometimes what you do, and which I've had done as well, I've had a producer come to me when I was in the studio position, and they were sort of a junior producer. They'd had maybe one show. And then I packaged them with someone who they could learn off and who I know that would guarantee that my money wouldn't be blown by it.
Thank you.
Okay. And good luck. That's great. Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, congrats, Sebastian. That's amazing. I want to know what,
yeah.
I need to watch this. You need to send me a link for this.
Yeah, I've heard of that show, by the way, Sebastian. And, you know, I'll try and, is it Amazon or Netflix?
It's Amazon Prime. Yeah.
It's Amazon. All right, I'll try and find out some information for you if I can.
I think Vincent, you have a question? Vincent,
yes.
Your hand is up. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. We've been going a little bit back and forth, kind of talking about showrunners and how they get locked up, and then how important they are at the same time to have. So I'm wondering any strategies you have to find someone who's just like about to pop or blow up, and how you go about sort of keeping your finger on the pulse in that sense.
Yeah, and that's a really great question. You really have to, I always go into, I do my own research, and I look at the showrunner. I look at a show that I really like that's similar, and then I look at the showrunner, and then I look at actually who the writers are that have written the most on the series.
Do you use like IMDb when you're doing these sorts of things?
IMDb Pro has it. Yep, IMDb Pro, that's all you need to do. $60 a year is worth it. And you can do all your research just from that. And those showrunners are hungry to jump into the seat. And you put them with, you know, let's say a good producer that can manage budgets, and they're fine. And so you do like a producing team. So there's two types of showrunners. There's a showrunner who looks after the budget and is probably a director, or a showrunner that looks after the budget and is probably a writer. And there's two different. So for example, I have a series with the showrunner of The Blacklist, who replaced the last 2-3 showrunners and made the show a hit. But he was a producer who could keep budget, but he was also a director. And so he would work with different writers, and he would have them underneath him and oversee it that way. So your showrunner can work in different ways. If your script needs help and it needs to be rewritten, then obviously the writer showrunner is the strongest in the room. But if you've got a really talented writer, and I call them baby showrunners, and you need them just to actually, you know, gain the experience, well, then put them, if it's not you, you know, I usually work with them, but usually put them with another, you know, producer who's an EP and not a day-to-day showrunner, but can oversee the show, or with a directing showrunner, and you can get that done as well. And it's an easier way to do it. Because you're right, they're all locked up. All the good ones are locked up. Right now they're not, no one's working, but they're reading scripts and they're reading things, so.
Got it, thank you.
Great. Anyone else have any questions? All right.
Jaden, I think.
Oh, it's Jaden. Hold on. I'm not seeing my, well, you go ahead. I'm not seeing it on my end.
Hi, I think I might be at the last.
Oh, good.
So,
yes.
Yeah, so since like the COVID-19 is kind of, you know, much more serious than what we thought at the beginning, what kind of like, you know, future do you predict both for Wendy and Jeanette in the kind of this year, or maybe like maybe until next year? What kind of future do you think for the film industry and also the TV series?
It's a really great question, because it's a question that every single one of us as producers are asking right now. And I've had to deal with everything from insurance and go back, because I've had to actually shoot to finish something during this time, and how I get it through, and then the future. So I don't think the US is very safe right now. I'm going to be really perfectly frank with you, to shoot. As a producer on set, you're responsible for every single person and everything that goes wrong. And that budget, you will be in breach and you can be sued. So I take that as a very, very big responsibility when I'm heading a show. And am I being safe? These are my family. Am I bringing them into a safe environment? So there's a couple of things that some of my colleagues and I have been talking about, and how we're going to shoot, let's just say, our next movie or our next project. We do have you know, a green light on a very big movie. We're just looking at a director right now, but the financing is in place, and we've decided not to shoot it here. We're shooting it all overseas. And we've decided, instead of using, you know, we'll probably, in a private jet, probably fly over the main actor and the main people. And then we'll probably pick up a lot more locals and testing, and keep it as a closed set. And then have it basically, or like people are seconded, and in this area like a compound where we'll have to shoot it, especially when you're dealing with studio sets and you're having to rebuild this, you know, this studio set and do that sort of thing. You know, Australia has done it quite well in doing that, and it seems to be a model that's working. So, you know, even though the US is opening for filming, I'm not sure it's quite safe. Canada is a lot safer. And I actually do have a producing partner who is an actress right now, and I can't say too much, but she was called onto set next week and it's a big series. And I talked to her last week, and she said, I've just told the producers to write me out of the series, because even I don't feel safe in Canada, because everyone is touching me. You know, it's fine for you as a producer, that you just have to remember. And it made me really look at it from the actor's point of view. She goes, I've got people taking my clothes, I've got people doing my hair, I've got people doing my makeup, and they're just touching me everywhere. And I've got 3 boys. And she's like, it's not worth my life to do that. And so it made me really stop. And I thought, you know what? She's right. Is this going to be worth it? How are we going to shoot this? So I would say I'm looking at, I'm lucky that, you know, I am international. I have different passports that we're able to shoot that, or look at more co-productions and how we can do it. I don't think the US is going to be safe until there is a vaccine, which is, they're doing trials in September. They're coming out in January. Unless you've had everyone tested, it's a seconded set, and then you've got very strict regulations of wiping down, and obviously, you know, PPEs in place. But it's going to be hard.
I would second that. I mean, we have one series that is a small, reality, our Dogmaster series, which is defined. So there we are going to have a very small crew. We're going to shoot, we're going to test everyone that we are including. But the big series that I'm working on, I'm shooting that in Germany. I'm not shooting that here. And there they have very strict rules already in place for that. But it all comes down to a reduced set. I don't know if you guys heard about SAG closing down a production. I forgot what it was. I think Jim mentioned something about that, where they say we should shoot. I think it was it Michael Mann's production that was shut down by SAG. So even the guilds are very on target and on top over everything, even with big, producers like directors. They basically say, we're shutting you down, we're not letting you injure our cast. So there are going to get, I think we're going to get more pressure here in the US. I agree with you, Wendy. I think it is more practical, being a practical German, to actually shoot outside of the US. I also wanted to mention that I do see a change in the industry entirely, especially as it relates to theatrical distribution. I have producing partners that I work with that have produced movies that were ready to go into the theaters, and they're not going into the theaters, which is obviously for the investors a whole nightmare. And all these deals are falling apart. The theatrical distribution deals are falling apart. It's a mess. But I think there's going to be a new strategy relating, especially theatrically released films. I think we're going to see more of maybe on-demand streaming, simultaneous kind of stuff being released. I mean, when I go on demand, I see a lot of movies being on there that was supposed to be theatrically released and being basically, you can buy them for like $19. The prices go up, but these were the movies that you would pay $20 for to see in the movie theaters. So I mean, one has to see how the math works out. I'm kind of curious to see, where does that money go? Do we have to, I mean, for me, with my financing brain, I'm thinking, okay, does it go to Spectrum? Does it go to the cable first? How does that go? Where's the box office go? Box office, so to speak. But I think there's going to be a revamping of the theatrical model. I had a conversation with someone from my other class who lives in, I think it was Hong Kong, where they have theaters that are built a little differently than here, where they really have separated seating. So you're further away from each other, and you have the option to go into a theater like that. You pay a little more for the ticket, but you have an option to be like further away. And that might be a model for theater owners to figure out, because right now, obviously, they're already a distressed asset. I know this because I work with a Wall Street firm who are buying theaters right now. So I do see some changes coming there, and I'm curious to see how that on the bigger picture will affect us all. Okay, I think does anyone else have anything that I'm missing here? Speak if you're still up. Otherwise, I'm going to close this down. And I would say thank you very much to Wendy. You were amazing. Thank you for doing this. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, everyone. And good luck. It just takes time and tenacity. Just keep with it. But yeah. It's a great class. I think I might keep coming and visiting you guys, just because I keep relearning things that I keep forgetting.
Always, please, you have the link. It's always the same link. Always feel free to jump in. I'll tell you when we're back online. And on that note, I'm going to release the Canvas date when we have the next session. Will probably be in 2 weeks. But I want to make sure there's no federal holiday that I'm missing, like I did this one. How could I miss 4th of July? I don't know what's going on with me. Anyway,
I thought about saying something, but then I figured you knew what was going on.
I'm German. What do I do with 4th of July? Hey, so what, I say. But I did give you people who are going to party the option to come last night, and we had some people last night. But Wendy is with us today, and I'm so grateful for the wealth of knowledge and guidance she shared with us today. I really thank you so much. And you guys, if you have any questions about the sharing that I did online, you can rewatch this. Please feel free to contact me, email me, we'll set up a call or whatnot. If you get stuck anywhere with the modules, you always know where to find me. And any questions, email me or call, okay? I will let you guys go now. I will end the recording if I find the button to stop recording.